So picture this, a totally wrecked sanctuary, bodies everywhere, and one dude glowing like a nightlight in the middle. He's doing some magic thing on the floor, basically shouting, "Anybody out there? If you're alive, say something. If you can't talk, just wiggle a toe." He's begging, pouring out all this magic juice, and starting to think, "Welp, guess it's just me then, the sole survivor." But wait, there's a creepy reflection in his eye, and a voice booms, "Behold, the guy who got all the demons to carpool together, basically sending humanity down the toilet." They called him the High Priest. Meanwhile, some silver-haired dude is chanting ancient gibberish, snatches a baby from a demon's grubby mitts, and yeets it to safety. See, in this big war against demons from, Demonland, the wizards from the White Magic Tower decided to follow this guy, betting the whole farm on humanity's future. Seriously, without them, nobody could have pulled off what they did. Then, this lady just pops into the middle of the bloodbath and announces, "For the record, on April 28th at 3:12 p.m., I can officially confirm the High Priest has kicked the bucket." The wizard's like, "Oh hey, Edna," who's apparently the last dragon and the universe's official history blogger, Edna Solace. She tells the boss of the White Magic Tower she's got some good news and some bad news. And the mage, classic move, says, "Hit me with the bad news first." So Edna's like, "Okay, the demon army crashed your White Tower party, and long story short, most of your wizards are toast, and the whole tower's a wreck. All your mages and their term papers went up in smoke." So the tower boss just goes, "And the good news?" And she's like, "Oh, the Imperial Army got here sooner than we thought, and they're gonna pick up any leftovers, including your students." The guy hacks up a lung and says that's a relief, but Edna's wondering, "So, any regrets about how today's class went?" He's like, "Nah," claiming that because of the one person he picked and mentored, he couldn't possibly feel bad about it in front of them. Edna asks if he has any last words. The guy asks her, "Could you check in on my students every once in a while? They're young and a little too enthusiastic." And Edna's like, "Sure, I'll babysit every now and then." He gets all sarcastic, "Wow, a dragon taking orders from a puny human." And the dragon's like, "Hey, you're right to point that out, because this whole continent, and me personally, we're not going to forget what you White Tower folks gave up." The man is all, "Well, duh," then admits, "Okay, fine. It'd be a lie to say I have zero regrets. I was the best mage, but let's be real, I was a pretty lousy manager. But if I ever got a do-over, I wouldn't care if they called me the bad guy. I just want to live for me, myself, and I." Instead of worrying about his students, the guy just wanted to live that chill life. So Edna gently closes the Tower Master's eyes and goes, "Okay, at 3:47 p.m., I am confirming that the head honcho of the White Magic Tower, Oscar Sage, has officially checked out." Turns out the High Priest had taken out hundreds of active mages, including the level 9 big shot, Oscar Sage, who bought the farm in the chaos. Cut 2. A gentle breeze blowing through some giant tower. Some dude with black hair is passed out in bed, and a white-haired guy is staring at him. A leaf brushes the sleeping guy's hand. He jolts awake like he's been electrocuted, smacking the blue-haired dude right in the face. The blue-haired guy spills water everywhere and yells, "I'm soaked. I was just trying to change your stupid towel because you keep sleep fighting. It's so annoying. And you never even say thank you for taking care of you." And the other guy just deadpans, "I fell. Out cold and practically kicking the bucket." And get this, he was totally convinced he was a goner, pointing the finger at the High Priest. Swore the guy put a hole right through his ticker. He tried to get a word in edgewise, but nope. Some ticked-off blonde dude just had to interrupt, who started yelling about him being awake. The blue-haired kid was like, "Dude, take a chill pill. He's only been conscious for like 5 minutes. But the old guy basically told Frank to scram so he could open a can of whoop-ass. Oscar Sage, meanwhile, is just like, "Wait, how am I not dead?" The elder totally lost it, screaming the question back at him like, "Oh, you find it fascinating that you're alive, do you?" All while Oscar's brain is going, "Yep, definitely a mage from the White Tower." So he orders the guy to explain the whole situation, A to Z, and the old dude just echoes him again, super annoyed that he has to actually explain things. He stomps forward, ready to smack some sense into him, yelling that he better start groveling. Oscar, completely ignoring the threat, is like, "So, about that attack. Was it some assassin planted by the demons? 'Cause he used a windshield that's supposed to block literally anything, and the wrist facing the wind is supposed to turn into a wet noodle." The guy was some low-level chump who clearly didn't think this through, which made Oscar wonder why the windshield. He was just fizzling out. Talk about a pathetic magic display. The elder just waves his hand and is all, "Hey, the shield was perfectly fine, and I haven't just been sitting on my thumbs all this time." Then he starts rambling about filing some disciplinary action. over the research stuff and tells him to just focus on getting better. Frank's just like, yeah, beat it, old man. He's wondering if Oscar's gone completely bonkers, while our boy is shaking like a leaf, thinking, the shield poofed the second I cast it, and panicking about how long. He was actually napping. Frank just shrugs, saying, yeah, that's just Elder Maxim for ya, basically telling him he's totally screwed. Oscar's doing a self-scan and realizing his mana circles, the amount, the purity, it's all garbage. He's desperate to figure out what in the world is wrong with his body. So he asks the million-dollar question, what day is it? Frank casually drops that it's September 21st and he was just knocked out for a bit. Oscar's like, wait, I've been snoozing for 5 whole months, and Frank's just staring at him like, what are you even talking about? It's been, like, a single day. Oscar just says, alright, whatever, we need to get Lloyd on the line. If he's not around, try Gilly or Sasha. Somebody's gotta know what the heck happened. Frank is like, whoa, hold up, forget those backstabbers, and then gets all bent out of shape, asking why he's being so buddy-buddy with the Tower Master's name. He's wondering if Oscar's memory got scrambled, 'cause, newsflash, Lloyd Schultz totally ditched the White Tower and became a groupie for the Red Tower Master. Oh, and Gilead Dominic? He jacked a super important book and bounced. That's when Oscar notices the air around Frank is just dead still. Then he processes the whole Sasha is the Tower Master thing and is like, hold on, how did a 5-year-old even pull that off? His buddy's just like, you're forgetting the 20 years she lived before those 5. The mage is just thinking, man, some people have wild imaginations, and starts wondering why he's getting so worked up over a kid. But then, it all made sense when he saw a strange reflection staring back from the window. Oscar's first thought is, who is that guy? Before realizing, wait a minute, I can't believe what I'm seeing, because a whopping 20 years had flown by since he bit the dust. And man, things had changed. Now you've got these glowy things lighting up the streets and even horseless carriages puttering around. And it was all thanks to the magical engineering revolution. He figures they must have just adored seeing all this. 'Cause back when the world was ending, they pretty much just threw in the towel on everything. So, piecing together the info on this body's owner, some kid named Oscar Crushen got scooped up by the Magic Tower when he was just 10. And now he's 20. He's a level 1 mage from a family that's seen better days, which, let's be honest, is kinda pathetic for a 20-year-old, 10 years old. So naturally, he tried to speedrun his career by chugging some sketchy back alley potion, and you guessed it, he immediately face-planted. I mean, it kinda made sense. If that stuff had actually worked, his magic levels would have shot through the roof. On top of that, just owning the illegal brew put his life on the line, and he could have popped from a mana overload. But then he noticed, something was different with his body. He had to know what was up, because he was packing way too much heat for a level 1 mage. And it was the good stuff, too pure, uncut mana. He wondered if that sketchy potion was the reason, but then, a drop of blood oozed out from his finger. Oscar was like, what the heck is that? This nasty gunk started dripping from his fingertip, and when it hit the ground, it just sizzled and vanished. Oscar's eyes went wide, thinking, was that poison? And why was it in my body? But then it all clicked. He had a pretty good hunch about what really went down. First off, that so-called elixir wasn't the real problem, because a legit one costs a fortune that this kid could never afford. The real issue was that poor Oscar had no clue he was chugging straight-up poison, and judging by the puddle of gunk, it was a lot. In other words, he didn't go out in a blaze of glory from a power overload. He was taken down by poison and enough of it to drop. A level 1 mage 10 times over. If it hadn't been me in here now, nobody would have ever traced it. Clenching his fist, Oscar stood up. I have no idea who's playing pinball with my soul, he muttered. But hey, I got a second chance out of the deal. Right before he kicked the bucket, he decided to live for himself. And this wasn't a terrible start. So, as a thank you to Oscar Crushen for letting me borrow this body, he declared, I'll get some payback for you. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Siren, a goon reports, Boss, we got news from the shop. His boss, clearly a stickler, replied, You will address me properly. The subordinate quickly apologized, but the boss just wanted the scoop. Spit it out. So, the guy explained that the shop was completely trashed from the inside by a mage. The boss slammed his bottle down. A mage? Who was it? He was looking for the guy who sold the elixir, the goon said. Could it have been that Oscar Crushen kid? But the boss just laughed. Get real. That kid was a bookworm, not a fighter. No way he could pull that off. The subordinate then got nervous. What if the White Tower starts sniffing around? His leader just shot him a look. Did you already forget who hired us to deal with Oscar? He was flashing a White Tower ring, the kind only mages from there get. A new voice cut in. Wow, What kind of idiot is so obvious about where they're from? The subordinate spun around, shouting, "Who's there?" A young man hopped through the window and strolled right up to them. He thought to himself, I just followed the stench from the vial, and it looks like this party is bigger than I thought. The boss glared. Are you the one who wrecked my shop? Oscar just grinned. That was me. But don't stop on my account. You guys were having such an interesting conversation. Please, continue. The boss grunted. I figured you just played dumb. He then yelled to his men. All right, boys, get him. A thug charged at Oscar, pulling his sword. The mage just sighed. All right, if you really want to do this, I'm not going to say no. He flicked his wrist, and a blast of cutting wind shot toward the guy, slicing him up. The guy's head hit the floor. Oscar blinked. Huh, can't believe it was that easy. The boss screamed, Bart, and pointed a piece at Oscar, calling him some choice names. He pops off 3 rounds at our magic man. Oscar's just like, well now, this is a little something new. He throws up a wind shield, noticing there's 0 mana, and he's super curious what kind of science project is making this thing go pew-pew. The boss screams, he stopped my bullets, and Oscar's like, hey, what did you call that thing? Catchy name, 'cause I'm about to send it right back to you. Return to sender. He flicks the projectiles back at the goon. They slam into his chest, gut, and leg, sending the dude tumbling to the floor, swearing a blue streak. Oscar strolls over, casually mentioning that all the sound in the room is on mute, so nobody's coming to save his sorry butt. The boss sputters. How can a measly level 1 mage pull off a level 5 silence spell? And Oscar's like, oh, this old thing? Just a little sound link so you can't scream for help. But hey, I'd really appreciate it if you'd answer a few questions. Like, who paid you to try and turn me into a human pincushion? The boss tells him to shove it but gets cut off by a boot rearranging his face. Oscar's just like, wow, your pride must be worth a whole lot more than your life. Not bad. Then, the guy gets hit with some kind of freaky spell. Suddenly, he's feeling a world of hurt everywhere. Turns out, Oscar hooked up the wind to his nervous system, making it feel like 1,000 tiny needles are having a party inside him. But Oscar says, look, I'm not into playing these kinds of games, so just spill it. The guy starts begging him to make it stop, yelling, okay, I'll tell you everything. Oscar's like, deal, and snaps his fingers, ending the spell. Now talk. Everything you know about your boss's boss. The goon says the mystery client gave him some magic juice and a fat stack of cash, telling them to sell the stuff to Oscar for cheap. Naturally, they took the deal. Oscar asks, so, what'd this guy look like? The dude says, he was rocking a hood, couldn't see his face at all, but he was definitely flashing a white tower ring. Oscar raises an eyebrow, thinking, yeah, right. That's probably just a misdirection play to fool this chump. But the goon insists, no, the guy had this weird smell, you know? Like super fresh mint, that's all I got. Oscar then asks, so what was the plan after you guys, took me out? And the boss says, man, things have been rough for the White Tower ever since it got kicked out of the Big Four Towers Club. I doubt they'd even bother looking into it. Oscar's like, wait, what are you talking about? And the boss gets all confused. Wasn't that something you were supposed to know? The mage plays it cool, blaming it on. Whoops, must have forgotten after I chugged that elixir. The boss tells him, just grab the papers, man. He starts digging through a drawer. He hands them over, saying, here, these are the files you need. Oscar starts thinking, okay, so it all starts with the White Tower. April 28th is marked as the White Night because some high priest bit the dust, and out of all the towers, it was the absolute worst, and they're gonna have some big announcement on this White Night day. Oscar remembers that the White Tower wasn't exactly known for its cutting-edge magic, recalling some of Edna's files that warned about preventing exactly this kind of mess. He tells the boss, all right, give me the rundown. What do the 4 big-shot magic towers actually do for a living? The Yellow Tower of the West handles all the electricity. They kicked off the whole magical engineering boom, making all sorts of game-changing gadgets. The Blue Tower of the South is all about clean water, farming, and brewing up potions. And the Red Desert Tower of the East? They're basically the Army's magic division, helping out on monster-stomping missions. Oscar asks, okay, so what about the White Tower? The boss just says, oh, them? They do deliveries. The mage is totally floored, asking, wait, deliveries? You mean like Amazon Prime for wizards? And the guy's saying the White Tower mages can freaking fly, giving them a serious edge in the speedy delivery game. Oscar's like, what in the world is this nonsense? Picturing these wizards soaring through the sky like superheroes. And apparently, they rule the skies, seen as these big-shot symbols of freedom, totally upstaging dragons and eagles. Oscar just has to ask who cooked up that ridiculous PR stunt. and the boss says it was the new head of the White Tower. The mage thinks to himself, that's gotta be my own little brat. He then asks about the farming business and drinking water, wondering if potions weren't supposed to be the main cash cow for a magic tower, and how the heck did the Blue Tower get a monopoly on that? The dude explains the Blue Tower totally cornered the potion market, and Oscar remembers the White Tower used to be the top dog before they lost everything when their secret recipes went up in smoke. So, the boss says now they just sell fancy water at sky-high prices and do rain dances for places that are turning into deserts. Oscar's like, wait, why are people buying plain old water? And the guy says it's the latest craze for the filthy rich. The mage is fuming, thinking they're acting like a bunch of clowns for a few measly bucks when people could just drink from a well, realizing the White Tower has become a total joke compared to the others. And yeah, it was true, the other towers were booming. This festival was their last shot. The boss then reminds Oscar about his not-so-great physical condition, and the mage is pretty sure he's about to kick the bucket from the shock and all the red stuff he's leaked. Oscar figures they gave him some useful intel and debates, saving the guy, but then remembers his resume includes setting fires, moving shady goods, shaking people down for money, and even ordering a little permanent removal. He concludes the guy is walking garbage and just yeets himself out the window without a word. As he's leaving, Oscar shouts, "Try being a decent person in your next life." Later, at dawn in the White Tower, he stumbles into a room complaining he's exhausted, but can't believe he's this wiped out from a few basic spells, and wants to know what kind of bargain bin body this is, and if he could even pull off times that times magic in this state. The legendary magic that made Oscar Sage the greatest wizard in human history, the Wind Archive. But it just fizzles out, and he grumbles that he can't use it just yet. He's got to upgrade this body first, starting with a scan spell, because he needs to download way more data on this thing immediately. His memories were a total mess, even with the cliff notes Frank gave him. But it was super important to get the full story on Oscar Crucian if he wanted to keep this body from falling apart. He was the heir of Count Crucian, and the only person to survive a nasty fire at their mansion. The entire magical world hailed him as a boy genius, and the hype was off the charts, with every magical club trying to recruit him. In 6 years, he got into the Imperial Magic Academy, but only managed to ace his theory classes and nothing else. With the insane thesis he published, it was easy to see he was a brainiac, which made him wonder how a guy like that was still level 1. Turns out it was because of some rotten luck, since he had mana deficiency syndrome, even though he had the potential to be a legendary mage, the poster boy for his generation. Oscar mumbles, mana deficiency syndrome, huh? If that's for real, it explains why he's level 1, since he gets magic better than anyone but just can't cast a spell to save his life. Oscar says the scan is done, tells it to show him the results, and notices something's not right. He doesn't have mana deficiency at all. Oscar, totally floored, says, "This isn't a disease, it's like somebody literally put a magical zip tie on his circuit." See, mana deficiency syndrome is when you can't save up magic, and even with a whopping 20 circuits, a guy with that is stuck at level 3 because he's got no magical Wi-Fi signal. So yeah, Oscar Crucian was a whole different can of worms. His magic plumbing wasn't busted from the factory. Someone intentionally clogged the pipes. And if this guy was the brainiac everyone claimed, he should have known he didn't have mana deficiency. It would have been awesome if he'd just written that in his diary. Like, "Dear Diary, someone sabotaged me. LOL." According to Frank, the original Oscar Crucian was a total booze hound, which makes me wonder if the dude was just method, acting a character he made up. Like, he knew someone blocked his circuit and just decided to lean into the whole spoiled, angsty brat routine on purpose. If that's the real story, it totally explains why he chugged that illegal elixir. I mean, in that spot, you wouldn't trust anybody either. The old Oscar needed to bust his own chains. Me, on the other hand, I just gotta plug a few things back in, and it's showtime. I stumble upon one of Oscar's books, and it's marked up like crazy, a total rewrite of basic magic. So, obviously, I start reading. And man, I start seeing things from a completely wild new perspective. Some notes even say that wind trajectory is a total snooze fest, and that windshield, a supposedly defensive spell, could be used to absolutely wreck someone if you just analyze how weapons fly. I'm thinking, hey, this guy's advanced windshield concept is pretty much what I was already doing. It's a completely different ballpark from the whole put up a shield and pray idea. On top of that, he wrote a whole playbook on how to use it for every possible situation, and there were tons of basic spells he just invented himself. He couldn't actually cast a single spell, but he ran all the experiments in his head. I finally get why they called him a genius. We're basically on the same wavelength with how we interpret the theory. And seriously, just from this one book, I can tell the guy never, ever gave up on magic. He worked harder than anyone, and his passion is practically screaming off the pages. Reading that last sentence, It said he hopes this book echoes through the faintest breeze of the White Tower, coming from a mage who was facing his own personal final boss. I realize he knew. He knew everything, but he still went through all this crap completely alone. I mutter Oscar Crushin as I get up from my chair, thinking this kid was a real trooper who refused to tap out even when fate dealt him a garbage hand, and just walked that lonely road all by himself. I plop down on the couch in the room, and I swear on my title as the 17th Master of the Magic Tower that I will untangle the knot he never could. And as a bonus, the people who clipped his wings are gonna pay. Next thing I know, I'm in a greenhouse, walking around and wondering how the heck I got there. Then I remember, oh right, I totally passed out from exhaustion after I started doing magical neurosurgery on my own circuit. But then I hear someone calling for their master. And there I am, my old self, Oscar the Sage, having a powwow on the floor with my disciples. My first thought is, ugh, this stupid dream curse again. Some demon from the Nightmare Viscounts fan club hit me with a curse where I have to watch reruns of my past every time I fall asleep. I was honestly hoping the curse would get lost in the mail when I switched bodies. But nope, looks like this thing is super glued to my soul, not just my meat suit. Still, I'm wondering if maybe this is a blessing in disguise, since the dreams about my students are still crystal clear and not just some sappy trip down memory lane. The kids ask what their teacher would say, and I'm right there with it, explaining that magic, while it's all made of the same stuff, is basically split into different flavors, like enhancement, acceleration, balance, and a whole bunch of others. Lloyd pipes up that the White Tower is all about that harmonization type, and his master's like, you bet, since wind magic is obviously the best. Sasha asks if every magic tower is, like, a snob about which magic type they use, and Oscar breaks it down, explaining how certain magic types just vibe better with certain towers. The Golden Tower? They've got a serious need for speed, so they're all about acceleration. The Red Tower is obsessed with fire, so naturally, they use enhancement, while the Blue and White Towers are just trying to keep the peace with the balance type. Gilead basically screams that he better get acceleration magic, because slow stuff is just the absolute worst. And Oscar's just like, tough luck, kid, you don't get to pick, it's something you're born with. Sasha wonders how you're supposed to know what you popped out with, and her master says it's way easier than she thinks, telling her to just stick out her pointer finger and do the magic thing. The girl's all, this is literally my first time, and it might take a hot minute, but her master is super chill about it, so she works her magic and goes, whoa, something's happening. Oscar tells her that's the harmony type. The little girl gets all excited, asking if it's just like her master's, and he gives her a big old yes. She beams, saying she totally loves it. Then Juliet gives it a shot, and his master announces that, just like he was whining about, it's the acceleration type. The little dude starts doing a victory dance while his master calls for Lloyd. Sasha gasps that it's a gorgeous flower, and Oscar explains that it's a special type. Lloyd immediately asks if he can, swap it out once it's locked in. And his master is like, dude, it's a crazy rare type, found in less than 1% of all mages, asking why on earth he'd want to trade it. The kid just says he'd much rather have the boring old balance type, just like his master. But his master starts muttering to himself, wondering what the heck to do now, since he was totally planning on giving Lloyd a ton of extra private lessons and wants to know what's the point if he gives him a new type. The kid's ears immediately perk up and he repeats, private lessons? His master confirms, yep, special types need way more one-on-one time with their teacher. And just like that, the kid decides the special type isn't so bad after all. But his master has to promise. So they seal the deal with a pinky swear. And Oscar thinks about that little schemer, Lloyd, whose nickname was basically Mr. I Got a Deal. But no matter how much he acted like a tiny adult, he was still just a kid. Suddenly, a radio on the wall crackles to life, blaring, paging all mages. This is a message from the radio room. We're looking for the mage Oscar Crushin. Get your butt to laboratory 4202. And he groans, wondering how long he was out, since he's only got 8 physical circuits left. On top of that, when he finally unlocked his mana circuits, he only got 2 measly mana lines, and is now a pathetic level 2. He thinks to himself, who in their right mind would be thrilled about hitting level 2? Then Elder Maxim shows up, asking how he's feeling, since Frank's report said he was looking less like death warmed over. Oscar walks up and agrees, while the Elder nods, and he can't help but think this Elder is actually his junior. Yep, that's Elder Maxim Bisk, a spring chicken at 45 years old. Oscar remembers how Maxim joined the tower way after him, but now the guy's all old and an elder. Still, he was a straight shooter and worked his tail off, so he was probably going to have a decent future. The guy used to trail him around like a lost puppy, calling him senior and later master of the magic tower, which Oscar admits was kinda cute, busting his hump because his magic was stuck in the past. Maxim catches him smirking and asks what's so funny, but then gets right to business, saying he got a report about Chief Gordon's family, and apparently, the guy was acting like his whole world was ending. Maxim asks if he's got anything to add to that, but Oscar plays dumb, claiming he has no clue why the guy kicked the bucket. Even though, it was totally because he tried to send Oscar on a one-way trip to the afterlife. The elixir was spiked and there were some shady backroom deals going on for his trouble, and unaliving. Maxim's like, "Is that why you did it?" And Oscar's all, "Yup, tried to talk, but they wanted to turn me into a human shish kebab," adding that the cash was 100% on the up and up. The book's got the contract to prove it, and Maxim just says, "Gotcha, it was self-defense, no biggie." Oscar's grateful, but then asks the old-timer for a personal solid, saying he's dying to meet the big boss of the Magic Tower. The elder just shuts his eyes and goes, not that hard, since he's scheduled to have a big ol' magic nerd out with her anyway. Oscar's thinking, "Man, I used to be Sasha's go-to magic geek." Then the elder drops the bomb. "You can see her in about 6 months." The kid is floored, realizing that's literally the night before the festival kicks off. Maxim explains she's on a business trip, handling some super important gig, and Oscar's just wondering why the head honcho is out running errands, muttering that some other mage must have dropped the ball, which is just pathetic. He's thinking it's because of that slacker that Sasha has to go herself, and he says, "Sorry to be nosy, but what's her power level, anyway?" Maxim says she's a level 7, and the boy scoffs, thinking that at her age, he was already a level 9. He thinks she's got a long way to go, though with her talent, she should be a level 8, minimum. The elder says they'll handle the paperwork and asks, "So, you been practicing your pew-pew magic again?" Oscar just shrugs, when the mood strikes. The elder just waves him off. "All right, get out of here." Just then, someone else strolls up to the door as the kid is leaving. Maxim asks, "What brings the vice president of this magic club here?" Hamel Glimwitz is like, "Hey now, don't be so hard on the kid," but then adds, "Guess I'm too late." The elder replies, "He gets into shenanigans, he gets a scolding." Hamel's like, "Fair, but I'm the one who brought him here, and he's got a soft spot for him," thinking that even the easy-peasy spells take more than a day or two to master, and the kid's been grinding in secret. He then calls Oscar a little brat, since he's putting in way more work than he let on. Hamel asks if they should bounce to the old-timers meeting since Fidelina was probably tapping her foot waiting for them, so Oscar zips up to the 10th floor, thinking he saw his students in a dream and really wanted to visit, saying the whole place felt like a ghost town as a gardener wanders over. The gardener says, "Well, if it isn't young Master Oscar," while the boy's just like, "And you are?" The gardener introduces himself as Wilter, and says he's the guy who wrangles the facilities of this magic tower. It looks like the rumors about Oscar's brain hitting the reset button were true, since they used to chew the fat all the time. Oscar asks just how far that gossip mill has churned and questions, "And what's this young Master Oscar deal?" Wilter says he's been working here since the OG Tower Master, Oscar Sage, was in charge. The boy is totally surprised by that, saying, "That's a pretty slick way to tell us apart. I'm totally stealing that." Then he asks if they can still be chat buddies. Wilter thanks him for the offer, but says it's gonna be a no-go, since he's about to punch his retirement clock for good. The kid asks what his plans are, and the old man says, "I've been stuck in this place for 40 years. I served under 3 different bosses, and my co-workers were a revolving door, but I was the last man standing in my department. The reason he hung around for so long was because the old boss, Oscar Sage, said something at his ceremony, something like, 'Every single person in this tower is essential.'" Oscar coughs, and the old man says, "I know it sounds a little cheesy, but from that day on, I worked my tail off, feeling like I was actually part of the team." The boy says, "Hey, that's not cheesy at all," and the old man just smiles. "Well, cheesy or not, my time here is up." Oscar then asks what he means by that, but the old man's like, "Look, kid, you know the tower's been scraping by lately, especially when it comes to our gear. The piggy bank is basically empty. And get this, next month is my 40-year anniversary here. And," Oscar jumps in, "Wait, is this about the long service bonus? The one where all tower staff, except us mages, get a shiny medal and some cash? Yeah, the reward you get on your 20th and 40th year. So you're due for 200,000, Oscar says. Wilter just sighs. "Yeah, about that. The tower's so broke, we can't even pay attention. To get that kind of money, a bunch of people would have to take on some seriously life-threatening jobs. I just can't have that on my conscience. I don't care what anyone says, this place is my second home." Oscar's thinking, "Man, I had no idea it was that dire. I knew the Azure Tower was pulling some weird stunts for cash, but who was I to judge?" Those guys figured out how to make a buck and were laughing all the way to the bank. Meanwhile, what do I have? A bunch of fancy titles. War hero, savior of humanity. Sounds great on paper, but those things haven't brought a dime into this tower for decades. Just then, Wilter snaps him out of it. Hey, why are you trying to crush your own hand there? Oscar asks. So, when are you planning on bailing? The old man says it'll be in about 2 weeks, then tells the young master to get to the infirmary and put something on that cut. But Oscar fires back. I was kind of hoping you'd stick around to be my chat buddy, because you're not leaving. I'll make sure of it. He thinks to himself, okay, I need a get-rich-quick scheme, like yesterday. A plan to make a boatload of money so this never, ever happens again. But then he's like, how am I even going to do that? All I ever think about is research, reading, and running missions. But it's a huge problem if the payout takes forever, and I'm still just a measly level 2 mage. I need a job that pays big, and it looks like brewing potions is my only real shot. Then, while flipping through the newspaper, something clicks. He remembers something he saw. Back in the Vice Master's office, Elder Fidelina is fuming. We can't just let this slide. It was blatant fraud. Maxim tries to chime in. Well, it was. Wrong, but the Elder cuts him off. What do you mean wrong? The old man just calmly replies. The culprit is having a nice, long think about what he did. Fidelina scoffs. You're just going to let him go? Thievery is a habit that just gets worse. But Maxim just waves her off. Don't you worry about it. It's not like there's much worth stealing around here anyway. The woman huffs. You argue with every single thing I say. Just throw the boy in isolation. But the old man shakes his head. That's ridiculous. It makes absolutely no sense to put a level 1 kid through something like that. Hamel chimes in. Elder Maxim has a point. Isolation training might be a bit much. It would just be a major setback for the kid. Instead, let's just make the boy pay back 3 times the money he took. The Elder snaps. Is just 3 times supposed to be enough? Seeing this is going nowhere, Hamel quickly changes the subject. Speaking of money, we have, like, none. We need to figure something out fast, since we have all these unused facilities. If we sell off the potion-making equipment, we could probably eat for at least 3 months. But Hamel immediately shoots that down. I will not allow that. The woman cries out for the Vice Master, but he stands his ground. This is a magic tower, a place where mages come to study magic and share what they know. You can't just lock the doors and call it a day. We can't sell off our entire future just to deal with today's grumbling stomachs. The Elder sneers. What future? We've been waiting on that supposed future for 20 years. And Maxim yells her name. The woman tells the Vice Master to get real, because even if some super genius did exist, they sure as heck wouldn't be slumming it with them. Hamel opens his mouth, but gets immediately shut down when the Elder spins around and asks who in the world they are, crashing their very important meeting. The old man just waves him in. Oscar strolls in, greeting the Elders and giving them the whole "it is I" routine. The Vice Master is like, spit it out, what do you want? And Oscar announces he's got a little business proposal he'd like to run by them. The Elder just about loses it, laughing his head off. A business? That's rich. Coming from the guy who borrowed our research funds a few days ago. Now this mage wants to be an entrepreneur. Oscar, completely ignoring him, says he stumbled upon a little something while digging through some old-timey newspapers about how the state of 20 is totally on lockdown thanks to some gnarly flu. Hamel chimes in. Oh yeah, I saw that. The word on the street is it's the Cadena flu. Which, if true, is basically the worst news ever. Right now, there's zero cure for the Cadena flu. And way back when, the White Tower had the one and only vaccine, but somebody fumbled the recipe about 20 years ago. Bingo, Oscar says. And the Azure Tower, you know, the guys who basically own the potion market, Asterisk could times copy it, and that's where he comes in. He announces he wants to start selling Cadena flu vaccines. Says since the White Tower used to have a sweet monopoly, he wants a piece of that action. Fidelina just scoffs, saying there was absolutely no reason to listen to this kid. The Magic Tower and every drug company on the planet have poured mountains of cash into labs, but nobody's cracked the code in 20 years. But sure, let's believe this 20-year-old punk thinks he's the one who can pull it off. Oscar's just like, yeah, everyone else failed. He admits he's just a 20-year-old dude, but hey, he's also a genius who's better than all of them. Fidelina looks completely fed up, pointing out he blew through 723,000 coins, plus another 25,000 on some shady medicine, while a poor farmer makes maybe 20,000 a year after taxes. He's a supposed genius who's clueless about money. But Hamel cuts in, calling out to Elder Fidelina, reminding her that Oscar is here to make in official Times investment proposal as a mage of the White Tower, and he knows she's the money person, but her attitude is way out of line. The woman gives a stiff apology for that. Oscar pipes up, "You know, I was wondering why you had it out for me, but I guess it makes sense since you're the treasurer and I've basically been a freeloader for 2 years. But still," he says, "I'm dead serious about this," asking her to just think about it. Inside, he's thinking, the loser who used to own this body and me are two totally different people. Hamill asks if he's positive it's the Cadena flu, and Oscar's like, 100%. Flip to page 2 of that newspaper. The elder starts reading that Archbishop Baldwin suddenly switched up his pilgrimage plans. Oscar points out he's planning to stay in Suriran for a whole month just for blessings, which is super weird. Who spends a month in the big cities for that? The El Terra cult is all about worshipping the planet's mom, Terrara, and they've got 7 archbishops who are supposedly these super pure, can't-be-bribed guys. But let's be real. That's a load of crap. It takes a boatload of donations to become a cardinal. He claims he's sticking around the state to visit the pilgrims for a month, but he's really just schmoozing with nobles and merchants to line his pockets. Now, Siren used to be a big deal back in the day, even if it's been shrinking lately. Maxim pipes up. He's got a point. The official reason has to be the prayer for blessings. Oscar cuts in. And that's what makes it even sketchier. They're praying over times, barren times, lands. And as we all know, the El Terrara pilgrimage route is set in stone. Siren, Mosque, Melbourne, and Green Whale. But right after that, they're supposed to head to the state of Vince. Oscar adds that the Archbishop also chilled in Knox for a month, right before this. Suriran. And unless I'm totally tripping, he'd also hole up in a mosque for a whole month, which kinda screams. He's dodging Vince like it's the plague. 'Cause hey, if something went sideways during his holy road trip, the folks in El Terra would totally blame it on pissing off the goddess, and you know that's coming straight from the Archbishop's mouth. Maxim chimes in that Baldwin knows this flu is the real Cadena deal and wonders why it's dragging on forever. And Oscar's like, yeah, that's the story they're spinning. The old lady pipes up. Not bad for a book-smart mage, but let's put a pin in that for now. Hamill's like, I get what you're laying down, but my hands are tied on an official sponsorship. We're fresh out of mages to handle it. Then Hamill drops a bomb, so I'll just fund it myself this time. The elder lady just about has a cow, yelling about the Tower Master, but Hamill's all chill. It's cool, it's only 30,000 coins. That should cover it, right? Oscar just echoes the number, thinking, not even close, buddy. So, he stomps off to the potion lab, muttering, all right, time for plan B. He figures he'll whip up a basic vaccine with the cash he's got, and then squeeze some more out of the Archbishop. I mean, the guy's the one in the hot seat over this. Cadena flew, so shaking down a desperate man for cash should be a piece of cake. All right, let's get this party started, he thinks, then spots something. Weird. A red potion is bubbling out of the flask. He grins. It's showtime. Finally, after he's done. He's like, hey, not half bad. He's thinking, they say a real pro never loses their touch, but man, he just whipped up an aura. Energy drink on a whim, and was secretly terrified it was going to blow up in his face. Frank screams, my back is literally about to snap in two. Oscar casually asks, did you get all the herbs? And Frank's like, duh. Now you got anything to drink? I feel like I'm gonna pass out. So, the young mage hands him the energy drink. His buddy chugs it down. Oh, thank you. Man, that's good, and it's warm. How'd you whip this up? Oscar just shrugs. The ingredients were top-notch. Frank puffs out his chest. Yeah, I picked out the absolute best. The vendor was seriously ticked off, so the mage goes, with an eye like that, you could totally be a merchant instead of a mage. And the dude's like, funny you should say that. I was planning on it for when this whole tower goes belly up. But then, Oscar just slams his fist on the ground. Gah, I just couldn't resist. Frank's all confused. So, what do you need me to do? Elder, Fidalina told me to help you out. Oscar's thinking, that woman is a menace, while telling him, start moving those ingredients. He's grumbling to himself, I don't even need a babysitter. This whole White Tower is crawling with problem kids. Sure, they're talented, but they're bound to screw up somewhere. Still, if these little rascals actually grow up, they could be a huge help. And one of them is Frank Sirius. Oscar figures he's a pretty sharp kid. But now, he's getting real curious about him. And this is the perfect chance to test that theory. Frank pipes up, hey, all these herbs we bought? They're totally poisonous. We've got lilies of the valley, red camellias, ghost mushrooms, and merva leaves. Oscar just smirks. Just because they're poisonous doesn't mean they can't be medicine. You know that, right? But Frank fires back. Yeah, but we're supposed to steep them for 12 hours. You're not wrong, Oscar admits, but there's a tiny problem with that method. all the good stuff gets boiled away. Hey Frank, ever heard of the buns from the Yan dynasty? The kid nods. Yeah, I've seen 'em. You need one of those smoker things to make 'em, right? Oscar grins. Bingo. And that exact same gadget is how we're gonna detox these herbs and keep all the good stuff in. With that method, they can squeeze out a whopping 98% of the good stuff from the ingredients. Frank's like, hold up, if you can do that. You could basically own the whole potion market, but Oscar just shrugs. It's an old-timer trick. Frank then asks, so, are we done with the detox part? And the mage is like, nope, not even close. He says they just prepped the ingredients to make the real work less of a headache, because the fun part starts right now with some fancy air-draining magic. He explains he's got to pull the nasty bits out of the smoke, one by one, telling Frank to watch closely. The rest of the smoke will be totally clean, and they'll be able to collect all the toxins. Specifically, 23% from red camellias and a solid 47% from maravel leaves. Boom, there's your cure for the Kadena flu. He jokes that it was a piece of cake to whip up. Oscar then claps his hands and says, all right, your turn. Frank's internally screaming. Easy for you to say. He can't even juggle 2 spells at once, but he's too proud to admit he sucks at dual casting, so he just awkwardly asks about the spell. Oscar's sizing him up like, your mana control is a bit shaky, but not a total train wreck. But then adds, but that's about it, and asks if something's up. Frank finally cracks, are you messing with me? I can't dual cast. You need to be, like, a level 4 or 5 to get that stuff, and I'm just a lowly level 3. Oscar just smiles and says, don't worry, I'll teach you. Frank's eyes go wide. You're gonna teach me the secret technique? Oscar laughs. It's not that secret. Just imagine splitting your brain into different tabs. On the left tab, you cast spell A, and on the right tab, you cast spell B. He then pushes him. Go on, give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen? So Frank's just muttering to himself, brain tabs, right. Then, poof, he actually manages to clear the smoke and shouts in disbelief. Oscar gives him a slow clap. Nice one, you actually pulled it off. The blue-haired mage then wonders, why do they keep this trick under wraps for so long? The kid explains. Simple, they're greedy. He figures they don't want to share because it's a huge pain to train newbies for free, so it just became tradition. But when things get messy on the battlefield, tradition goes right out the window. Out there, you have to share your tricks every single day just to stay alive. The White Tower really needed to get with the times and start a knowledge-sharing program. Oscar's pretty impressed with the kid's first bottle, thinking, wow, this guy's actually got some talent. I really didn't expect him to nail it on the first go. Frank, trying to be modest, says, well, you're a good teacher. The mage just smirks. You seemed a lot grumpier a minute ago. Then the blue-haired kid gets all fired up. We've still got a mountain of ingredients. Let's get back to it. Oscar lets out a long sigh, looking at his hyperactive new buddy. All right, fine. We've got that giant smoker. Might as well do the whole batch at once. The kid's all for it. Fast forward a few hours, Frank looks like he wrestled a bear, and Oscar's counting a grand total of 514 bottles. Suddenly, Maxim bursts through the door yelling, we've got a problem. Frank, barely conscious, asks what's up. Maxim shoves a piece of paper in his face. The Azure Tower's Pharma Bros just confirmed they're visiting in 1 hour, and they're bringing Archbishop Baldwin. Maxim groans that they were a flash, tad too slow. Oscar's thinking, great, we were just stalling for time with zero actual plan. Then the old guy says, if we can just get to them first. But Frank finishes the thought, otherwise all this hard work is totally worthless. Maxim pats his back, telling him to chin up. Hey, sometimes life just kicks you in the teeth. But Oscar cuts in. Hold on, it's not over yet, if I remember right. The Kadena flu is officially a rank B disaster, right? And if that's the case, I've got a crazy idea we can try. Maxim's eyes light up. For real? Oscar just nods and asks, so old man, you think you can fly faster than a horse-drawn wagon? Meanwhile, over at Summon, over in Siren, a knock at the door basically screams, your appointment's here. To the Archbishop. Baldwin, cool as a cucumber, just tells his guys to let them in. In waltzes Moraine, a big shot level 5 mage from the oh-so-fancy Azure Tower, thanking him for not, slamming the door in their faces, along with director Neil Bran. Baldwin, probably yawning on the inside, tells the pair to park it, and Moraine thanks him again. Then the Archbishop gets down to business. He asks how that little Kadena flu medicine project is coming along, and the guy puffs up his chest. Oh, it's going swimmingly. Baldwin's just like, yeah, I'd expect nothing less. He then asks the million-dollar question. So when's this miracle cure actually hitting the shelves? and Moraine starts hemming and hawing about how their times, still times, just in clinical trials. Neil jumps in, sounding like a walking press release, saying once they get some good results, they'll totally get the Empire's stamp of approval from the food and medicine folks. Moraine, trying to dodge the question like a pro, is all. And as you know, Your Grace, these trials aren't exactly a one-and-done deal, and Baldwin basically cuts him off. Yeah, I get it. When? So the Azure Tower dude finally caves and says it'll be ready in about half a year. Baldwin just deadpans. Half a year? Buddy, I'm out of Vince in 4 months. You do the math. Moraine starts to sputter, but Baldwin's already asking what's all that ruckus outside. His guard's like, another mage is here to see you, and he turns to his guests. And you guys didn't think to mention you brought a +1? Moraine gets all flustered, apologizing and swearing up and down that they came alone. Now all 3 of them are staring at the door like, who the heck is it? Suddenly, the door swings open and this kid, Oscar, struts in like he owns the place, saying, if my memory serves, Elsia is the proper greeting, right? He introduces himself as Oscar Crushen, a get this level 2 mage from the White Tower, and he was there to make him an offer he can't refuse. Baldwin's just like, spit it out, kid. Oscar grins, I'm here to sell you the cure, for the Cadena flu. The Archbishop looks absolutely delighted. Well, isn't this perfect timing? These 2 were just talking my ear off about the very same thing. Oscar asks if he's late to the party, but Baldwin shuts that down with, not at all, considering these 2 showed up with nothing but excuses. And Oscar just beams, phew, because the White Tower is ready to talk business right here, right now. Moraine completely loses it and starts shouting, that's a total lie. The White Tower is broke. They couldn't develop a hangnail cure. The Archbishop just calmly asks the kid for his last name again, and the boy says, it's Crushen. So the cleric looks him dead in the eye. So, for real, you actually have the cure? Oscar puts a hand to his chest, acting all wounded. Sir, would I dare lie to an Archbishop of the Elter Order? He dramatically flips open a box. Behold, a sample. Baldwin, ever the pragmatist, asks, okay, fun size is cute, but if we make a deal, can you guys make like a zillion of these things? Moraine tries to butt in, but the cleric just glares at him. What do you think you're doing? You came here completely unprepared. The mage, scrambling for a comeback, blurts out, well, we don't have the Empire's official thumbs up from the Food and Drug Administration. He then whips around to Oscar, thinking he's so clever. And I bet you don't have Imperial approval either, do you? And the boy just says, nope. Moraine gets all smug. Aha! See? The White Tower is in the exact same boat as us. We'll be able to mass produce this stuff once we're approved. But Oscar cuts in. Yeah, but you gotta remember, pal, you're talking about the White Tower here. Moraine starts puffing his chest again. And considering the Azure Tower's glorious history, we times should obviously be the ones to handle this and develop the best medicine. Oscar just laughs. Dude, it's hilarious hearing you lecture me about the Azure Tower's history when you're standing in front of a White Tower mage. Moraine is seeing red now and tells him to back off, but the young mage is on a roll. Because if you check the history books, the White Tower was here first. The Azure Tower guy sputters, trying to argue that the age difference was just 5 years. Oscar just smirks. Oh, just a small times difference, you say? Funny, that small difference is the same gap every leader of your tower has been trying and failing to close ever since. A gap you couldn't close in 10,000 years. That's just History 101. And I guess he forgot who ran the whole potion racket just 20 years ago. Morris is all like, that's ancient history, nobody remembers. But oh boy, that really gets Oscar fired up, who just echoes, nobody remembers? And then says, well, that's certainly a take. Meanwhile, the Azure Tower folks are just staring, wondering about the sheer power level in the room. Oscar declares he'll give them a little history lesson, but a secretary bursts in, all apologetic, interrupting with news of an urgent call. Baldwin's like, spit it out, who is it? And the secretary reveals it's none other than the Lord of Vince. The guy on the phone is gushing about the Archbishop's immeasurable kindness, and Baldwin just repeats it back, confused. Then, the Lord of Vince drops the bombshell that they've received the cure for the Cadena flu. Apparently, the head honcho of the White Tower said they whipped it up on the down low, and all the credit goes to the Archbishop because every patient was back on their feet within hours, and it was a flat-out miracle. You can just see the smirk spreading across Oscar's face. Baldwin, playing it cool, says, that's great news, and asks about any nasty side effects. The Lord says there were zero, zilch, nada, it was incredible. But then he asks when they're getting the second shipment, cause he already asked the White Tower guy, who totally passed the buck to the Archbishop. The Archbishop, smooth as ever, promises to send the next batch as soon as it's ready, which shouldn't be too long. and the Lord thanks him profusely for it before hanging up. Baldwin immediately turns to Oscar and asks, "Was this your little stunt?" And the kid just says, "Yep," and that it seems like everything went according to plan. Morris absolutely loses it, slams the table, and yells that this is against FDA laws and Oscar will be totally screwed. But Oscar just scoffs, basically calling him a newbie who doesn't know the rules and asks if he even understands the first thing about how to win wars. Morris snaps at him not to change the subject. Oscar's just thinking this place needs to chill for at least 20 years, recalling that the biggest killer in the Demon War wasn't a weapon, but a good old-fashioned pandemic. Even with mages pumping out treatments like a factory, it took forever to get FDA approval. So, His Majesty added Article 42, Clause 8 to the law books, which allows for special treatments during wartime, but that little loophole didn't really change how the empires and the FDA usually operate, Moyer argues. But we're not at war. And Oscar replies that there are actually 3 scenarios that count as war. The first is your classic brawl with another species or nation. The second is a revolution. And finally, when you've got a Class B or higher disaster. The Kadena flu? A textbook, natural Class B disaster, which is why it wasn't necessary to bother with all that FDA red tape. Neil, trying to keep up, says, "Well, if the White Tower did it, we can too. We'll send our cure to the state of Vince right away." The Archbishop just sighs like, "You really don't get the mess you're in, do you?" This race was over the second their cure showed up in Vince. Baldwin spells it out. "The Lord of Vince thinks I was working with the White Tower. I can't exactly go back on that now and start promoting the Azure Tower." Neil's brilliant idea is to lower the price, but the holy man is offended, asking how he dares try to buy his reputation with cash. They try to deny it, but the man cuts them off, saying that's enough and he doesn't want to hear another peep about it. He tells them both to get lost, immediately. Mora looks absolutely furious as he gets up. On his way out, he mutters that he'll make Oscar pay for this, while the mage just thinks, "Man, this guy sounds like a villain straight out of a comic book," before casually dropping that he's already registered the patent for the treatment and the vaccine. Boom, with the palace. Mora spins around, totally ticked off, and our boy's like, "Hey, you want the good stuff? You better pony up the cash, licensing fees to the White Tower. Otherwise, you can just chuck those potions in the trash." Hearing that, the level 5 mage practically grinds his teeth to dust and storms out, fuming. Neil gives the Archbishop a see ya, then gives Oscar a nod. But then, Oscar gets a whiff of something weird coming off Neil. He suddenly remembers the big boss mentioning some one-of-a-kind smell, something fresh and crisp, kinda like mint. And that's literally all the info he got. So Oscar's just staring at the door like, "No way." And the Archbishop just busts out laughing, telling the kid to take a seat, saying, "All right, let's finally talk turkey. We gotta hammer out the price, especially since the Azure Tower and Newark were asking for a measly 2 million coins." Oscar just grins and goes, "If that's what they want, let's hit him with a cool 5 million. The Archbishop just loses it, howling with laughter, asking if he's for real. Fast forward a few hours at the White Tower, and someone's like, "What was that?" The Elder is bug-eyed, screaming, "That was 10 million coins." He keeps repeating it while Oscar's just chilling with a smirk. Fidelina swoops in for a hug and thanks the little troublemaker. Maxim's all, "I knew you had it in you the whole time." Hamel's just like, "That's insane. Spill the beans. What happened?" Even the Archbishop can't just cough up that kind of dough. Oscar's like, "Oh, those were just additional fees." The Master's ears perk up. "Additional fees, you say?" Then the kid genius breaks down the whole commercial licensing fees hustle. Hamel's like, "Seriously?" And the boy just nods, saying, "Yup." The White Tower, making an official announcement, is like a divine message to get these antidotes ready, as soon as possible. But here's the kicker. He's gunning for that cardinal spot after getting a so-called revelation from Mother Earth. So, the title of Archbishop is looking pretty sweet to him right now. Oscar says, "I totally played on that. He wanted to pay 1 million coins for the deal, and in return, I promised to get him the vaccines and antidotes within a week." Hamel's mind is blown. That's nuts, because the punishment was to pay back 3 times what was stolen. But you brought back more than 400,000 times that amount. She's like, "I think we can call this disciplinary thing over. Anyone got a problem with that?" And Fidelina's all for it. So, the Vice Master tells Oscar, "Hey kid, you need backup, you come to me." And Oscar's like, "Great, cause we need to round up some level 4 or higher mages like yesterday." Hamel's on board, saying she'll go scout for volunteers, and tells Elder Fidelina to make a joint announcement with the Magic Tower. The woman's like, what am I supposed to say?" But the Master lays it all out for her. He's like, "Just say potion production is hiring level 4 or higher mages." They'll get paid. And, wait for it, they get a free meat dinner. A few hours later, the potion lab is packed with mages, all buzzing about the grub and saying it was the best news ever. Oscar claps his hands. All right, settle down, seniors. Listen up. And, crickets. They totally ignore him. So, the kid snaps his fingers, pops off a sound spell, and suddenly, all the seniors are like, what's that horrible buzzing sound? Oscar pipes up, glad I have your attention. The reason I dragged you all here is to whip up some antidotes for the Kadena flu, and I desperately need your help. The students start whispering, why's the fallen genius here? Is this another one of his medical scams? The kid is just floored by the trash talk. He turns to Frank like, do they not like me or something? Why? And Frank's just like, dude, maybe take a second to think about everything you've ever done. Your personality is kinda. So, this guy was a total pain. A real big shot who blew through the tower's cash, did zero research, and basically just partied. Oscar started to wonder if he was actually that much of a mess. Just then, a blonde girl walks up and is like, hey, can I bug you for a sec? Seeing as how the White Tower's secret sauce for making stuff totally vanished, she's dying to know how they're gonna pull this off. Oscar just casually says they got the recipes back. The other students are still whispering in the back, and the blonde girl presses him, asking if they've actually proven the antidote works. That's when Crushin jumps in to confirm it, adding that the contract with the order is already signed and sealed. The blonde girl's eyes go wide, saying that must be worth a king's ransom. If word gets out, this whole deal is toast, she says, basically asking if he's nuts enough to trust them with such a huge secret. Oscar just shrugs and says, honestly, I have no clue why any of you guys are still hanging around this tower. The blonde girl is like, excuse me? Is that the way you talk to your seniors when you're begging for a favor? Because you just totally wasted my time, and I don't know what game this so-called amazing genius is playing. But newsflash, nobody here was asking for your little speech, but Oscar just says, oh, I know exactly times what every single one of you gave up to stay at the White Tower. The blonde is totally floored, and then he starts rattling off her stats. Lena White, level 5 mage, 25 years old. Had 7 different organizations practically begging to recruit you, all because of that crazy talent for judgment, and you turned every one of them down. Then he points to the others, Harak Dryan, 26, and Desert. Renee, also 26. And let's not forget Sophia Rose, 23, a straight-up wizard with alchemy. Oscar then says, and pretty much everyone else here got offers just as good. If a deal like that landed in my lap, I honestly don't know if I could have said no. But not one of you bailed on this place. Lena, still shocked, asks if the elders are in on this little secret powwow. Oscar nods, saying they didn't have a choice if they wanted to pull this off, because the last thing they want is to dump all this on the students. The White Tower is going through the most brutal, bone-chilling winter in its entire history. And with things being the way they are, you all chose to stick it out in the freezing cold. If I can't put my faith in people like you, then who the heck can I possibly trust in this world? He adds. But hey, if you're not into it, no hard feelings. You don't have to help. Frank just grumbles. Oh, here we go with the fake act. But Oscar just talks right over him, saying, anyway, the level 2s have to work. His buddy shouts, hey, that's me you're talking about, and Oscar just tells Frank to get a move on because he only needs 2 of them to get this party started. Lena just stares at Oscar for a second, then starts putting on a visor. She clears her throat, steps up, and asks, so, should I just grab a pair of these safety goggles? Then she asks what they need to do to get started. Sophia immediately chimes in. All right, everyone, you heard her. Let's get to it. Frank is just like, I gotta be dreaming. There's no way he just convinced all these people with a speech. The maid shrugs. It wasn't half bad. But, I should probably mention beforehand that the meat we're having isn't pork. The students immediately start guessing. Is it chicken? Please don't say it's rat. Then the mage announces it's beef. And the whole room erupts in cheers. And just like that, the vaccines and antidotes got made, hitting a whopping 140% of their original goal. Fast forward a week, and Oscar's taking a stroll through the greenhouse when he spots petals on the floor, immediately thinking, is this the handiwork of old man Walter? He must be back. I bet Hamill tracked him down and dragged him back here. He then plops down at a table in the greenhouse and starts reading a newspaper. The headline says the Vince territory has officially announced the end of the pandemic, just 2 days after the Kadena flu antidote was released. And what do you know? Oscar Crucian's name was being thrown around as a candidate for the Peace Prize building. The kid's thinking, all according to plan. just as Frank rolls up, already on the phone with his buddy, totally flipping out. He's saying it's unbelievable because vaccine orders are through the roof, and he's like, "Did you even see that list with the desert territories? The whole order, and even the Imperial family are in on it. Millions are basically pocket change now." And Oscar's just like, "Well, duh. Everyone needs it." Frank tries to be the voice of reason, saying the hype will die down, but the mage just pats him on the head. "Ah, you're so clever for figuring out that demand is a blast." The blue-haired dude asks who's even gonna buy the stuff later, since it'll be years. Oscar just replies that he doesn't need to sweat the money part, because get this, he's already brewed up potions for every single level of demand. And Frank just screams, "You actually had a plan for all this?" He thought those were the legendary star-tier potions from the rumors, but Crucian shuts that down fast. "Nope, we're slinging the cheap stuff, low and mid-tier." He says it's not time for the big guns yet. The star tiers are those insane regeneration potions from the White Tower, the kind of miracle juice that can practically yank you back from the great beyond, and making them would be insane. But Oscar's just thinking that would just make a bunch of greedy hyenas try to swipe his secret recipe. He's safe for now, thanks to the Archbishop's little force field, but still, he's gotta level up. So, he says, "Alright, as I was saying, time to go hunt down some very specific materials." And Frank's just like, when did you ever mention that?" Oscar just rattles off, "Lantern leaves and pistos." Frank immediately starts whining about how impossible that is. The mage says, "Aren't those your specialties?" But the blue-haired guy disagrees. "Yeah, maybe a long time ago." He says it's been a hot minute since those herb fields even existed. Frank gripes that Oscar has to be nuts for real this time, for dragging him all the way out here without even believing him. Then the blue-haired dude starts complaining, "Why are we walking? There's a perfectly good carriage." But the young mage is like, "The carriage doesn't go this far, just hang on a little longer. They've already hoofed it for 10 miles, and are supposedly almost there." Frank's just like, "Why are you using a measurement that went extinct?" Oscar, totally clueless, asks, "Wait, we don't use miles?" His friend has to explain that distances are in meters now, ever since the war, and pounds are grams. Crucian's thinking they changed pounds too, which were a total pain to calculate. But honestly, doing all that old-school math was more fun, and he kinda misses miles and pounds. But anyway, Frank spots a cabin up ahead, wondering if anyone's home. Just then, an old man cracks open the door. He asks, "You fellas seriously walk all the way out here?" Frank just sighs. "Yeah, the carriage could only take us to the entrance." And Oscar's like, what's that sound?" Just as a fancy carriage packed with goons in suits rolls up to the cabin, parking right on the flower bed. A guy in a suit asks the old-timer, "So, you ready to sell your land today or what?" The old man storms out of his cabin, totally ticked off, and gets right in the suit's face. "Isn't it about time you stopped being a complete idiot?" The old man fires back that it's not happening unless he's offering up that miserable castle. Devor Pavel, the businessman, says that acting all stubborn was only cute in the beginning, but if you keep living like this, no one's ever gonna give you the time of day. Ivan, the herb master, just snaps back, "That's none of your damn business." Devor tries to play it off like, "Hey, I'm doing this for you. Just hurry up and sell, and go enjoy a comfy life because land prices are about to tank." But Ivan just laughs. "That's hilarious, because, as long as I'm around, you'll never get a single permit for those factories of yours." The businessman just freezes for a few seconds. Then he just barks at his guys to get a move on. But as he's walking back to his ride, he stops like he just remembered something, saying that he accidentally squashed some of their precious weeds and had to pay up. Tossing the cash on the ground, Deor grumbles in the car that those guys with the old man were from the White Tower and demands to know what they were doing there. His lackey stammers that it's about herbs, because they've been making a killing off vaccines. The boss asks just how much of a killing, and his goon hands him a newspaper, saying it was a boatload. Deor scans the article, then just smacks his subordinate on the head, whining, "And you're telling me this now?" Thinking that if the old man gets backed by the White Tower, he'll be saying no to selling the land for years to come. And that just won't fly, since it'll totally mess up his plans. So, he gets his guy on the phone, who answers right away. Deor asks if he still has those freelancers he looked into, because it's time to hire them. His subordinate nervously asks which crew he meant, since they might get recognized. But the guy gets another smack on the head. "We just need to make the old man disappear, and then we'll just say he went missing to grab the land," he thinks, realizing it might look a little shady. But hey, he's got connections, and his subordinate pipes up. What if the White Tower hangs around the farm? If all 4 of the big magic towers get involved, dealing with Ivan is going to be a nightmare. But Deor just scoffs. What could happen? That whole 4 main magic towers bit is ancient history anyway. The White Tower is basically turning to dust. Meanwhile, Frank is stretched out on the grass, saying the old herb guy was a total champ for letting them crash for the night since it was late, and he even fed them. Oscar just smiles up at the starry sky, agreeing, remembering Ivan telling them it was too late to travel and they should just stay. Frank had asked if he was sure, and the old man said he had a duty to the White Tower to keep. Oscar's pondering that, but the blue-haired kid asks who that guy from earlier was, and Ivan explains he's a real piece of work named Deor who threatens and even makes people vanish. 3 years ago, he started a shopping spree for all the land and snagged everything but Ivan's plot, and a ton of people just up and left town. Frank asks what for, and Ivan just says, factories. Oscar then asks why he puts up with it, and the old man grins. That clown can't touch me, he's at a serious disadvantage. I'm what you call a cultural human heritage of herbal cultivation. Frank is like, whoa. So you've got protection from the royals? And the old man confirms it. Oscar then asks, so why not just sell? You'd make a ridiculous amount of money. Ivan says he's just stating the obvious, because he loves this land. It's been his home since day one, and it'll be his home until he's 6 feet under. Oscar says he's a good dude, and Frank adds that it was hilarious when he got all embarrassed and ran inside the house. But, he says, the stars out here are incredible, and it makes him kind of jealous. His friend asks, of what? Frank explains that he wanted to live a life that shines like a star, but he's pretty sure a genius like Oscar wouldn't get it. Oscar tells him he's totally underestimating himself, and his friend just thanks him, even if he thinks it's just empty words. Oscar insists they're not, because he's not the kind of guy who says stuff he doesn't mean, thinking to himself that, for the life of him, he can't figure out why his younger self ever thought this guy was a problem. And Frank just says, man, the stars are gorgeous. Oscar replies that a long time ago, you could see the stars right in the middle of Surin, thinking that now it's so bright at night from all the streetlights, you can't see a thing anymore. And it's a real bummer for all the romantics out there. Frank asks how long it's been and seriously doubts if Oscar could actually bring the whole herb business back from the dead in Surrey-Aaron. Oscar's like, hey, it's totally doable. We just gotta sweet talk old man Ivan. He suddenly gets a weird vibe from the place, jumping to his feet while Frank is all like, whoa dude, did you see a ghost or something? But Oscar says, nope people, 4 of them to be exact. Frank goes, huh, I didn't feel a thing. Oscar thinks to himself, for a guy with a decent magic dar like Frank to miss them, these guys must be up to no good, and tells his buddy to get on his feet because they've got visitors. Some dude strolls up, popping a huge bubblegum bubble, asking what the deal is, cause they totally got ghosted after they were supposed to, retire the old man, and that Deborah was a total chicken. An old-timer grunts, who cares? If it pays, we play. The bubblegum guy points out that Gramps is a big deal up north, even has a price on his head, but he's been laying low. Then Mr. Red Jacket walks up, saying, all right, that's enough chit-chat, don't get sloppy. The shooter, Jack Gang, mutters, gotta be some mages, while the old guy says, hey, as long as they're from the White Tower, we're golden. Those other guys are a real pain. Then this green-haired dude starts spinning his key, asking, so, are we doing this or what? Thinking it's way too quiet and the old fella might be taking a dirt nap already, he creeps over to the bed, figuring this is boringly easy and there are 0 mages. What a ripoff. But then he spots something funky and starts cussing up a storm as he spins around. Oscar says, my, you're a sharp one, and zaps him with a wind bullet, nailing the green-haired guy right in the dome. Oscar pops out from under the blanket, bragging, you know this wind bullet is pretty handy. A little spell that a brilliant young, me, Oscar, cooked up in my remix of basic magic. It's a fresh take on wine magic, and I gotta say, its power to put people to sleep is way better than I expected. Okay, so there should be 3 left. But then he does a quick head count and realizes, wait a minute, there were only 2. Jack yells, what did you do to Max, you magic freak? Oscar just shrugs, oh, he's just taking a nap in there. He'll probably be snoozing for a good long while. You know, like forever. The old-timer scoffs, pathetic idiot. Told him not to get cocky. Jack, already over it, demands, where's the herbalist? Honestly, I couldn't care less about Max. Oscar realizes these guys skip the trash talk and get straight to business. Real professionals. He warns them, all right fellas, let's talk this out. But Jack's not having it. Talk? Nah, I'd rather see some blood. Gramps, do the thing. And just like that, the old man lunges with a dagger, which smacks right into a magic shield. The knife gets knocked aside, and Oscar uses that split second to charge forward. The old man just turns with a creepy smile. Not bad, kid. Impressive. As Oscar closes in, the geezer readies his spear for another go, while Oscar gets a spell ready. The old guy's spear splits into 2, and he cackles, pretty neat toy, huh? Too bad you've got no luck. "Game's over, kiddo," he says, aiming right for Oscar's forehead. The young mage just casually flicks his finger, saying, "Man, this is even more boring than I thought," and unleashes his magic, adding, "Seriously, this is just pathetic." A gust of wind slams right into the blade. The old man's brain is short-circuiting, like, "That's impossible." Even caught by surprise, I shouldn't be getting tossed around. But Oscar's attack was a thing of beauty, shattering the blade into a million pieces. Oscar comments, "A unique weapon. Doesn't mean much when it's an antique." Just then, though, his spidey sense goes haywire. Oscar instinctively leaps back as the old man says he was totally tripping right after his big win. Then bam, a weapon fires, domes the old merc right in the noggin, and then zips straight for Oscar, just giving him a little love tap. The kid's face gets a minor boo-boo, and Jack's like, "Aw, what a waste," because if Oscar had been spacing out for like half a second more, he'd be pushing up daisies. Oscar's all, "Hey, what about your buddy?" But Jack just says he was just some guy on the payroll, totally replaceable. The mage thinks, "Yeesh, this is why villains get such a bad rap," and asks, "So, what's with that little pea shooter?" Jack gets all offended. "Hey, don't call it a toy. This thing cost a fortune." Oscar's like, "Let me guess. Acceleration, enchantment, and penetration. 3 spells baked right into that bad boy." The redhead is floored. "Whoa, how'd you know that?" Oscar just deadpans. "Because I couldn't freaking block it. Genius." Jack's like, "Cocky, aren't we? But hey, you got the skills to pay the bills. Ever thought about joining my crew? The pay is fantastic." But Oscar gets up and is like, "Nah, I'm good. Pretty sure my head would start to itch." And Jack just laughs. Fair point. Anyway, enough chit-chat. Oscar dives behind some fences, thinking, "Man, what kind of beast was the old magic tower master if he actually dodged this crazy thing? My wind bullets are basically moving in slow-mo compared to this guy's projectiles. So yeah, I'm kinda screwed here. I'm running on half a tank of mana, and my only shot is that tiny little window of time when Jack's fumbling to reload. After he fires, he's gotta pop in a new one, which takes exactly 1.4 seconds. The dude strolls around the field like, where'd that little rat scurry off to? And Oscar's thinking, I've got one shot to wrap this up in 1.24 seconds. So, he hits the gas with some acceleration magic and books it toward the guy. Jack spins around. Whoa, you really are fast, kid, but no human can beat my trinity. Then he lets one fly right at the kid's magic windshield. Jack's all smug like, game over, but then his bullet just swerves around the shield. Oscar keeps charging forward. Jack's brain just short circuits. How? He shouldn't be able to outrun that thing with just acceleration magic. Was it the shield? He wonders, right as the young man shoves his hand right in the guy's face. Jack sputters, how can a low-level mage? Oscar's just like, dude, would you even get it if I explained? He lets out a huge sigh over what just went down, because he had to use a really annoying piece of gear earlier. So, is that what they call the Trinity? Those 3 spells slapped onto the weapon? Man, that thing was seriously impressive, because I would have been totally toast otherwise. I basically used friction to wear down the durability of the enchantment on my windshield. The outside layer was all squishy and the inside was rock hard, so the bullet just couldn't punch through. And if that little trick hadn't worked, I'd be the one taking a dirt nap right now. So, first thing when I get back to the tower, I'm studying how to stick magic onto modern weapons. I'm really feeling the limits of this puny body, because it's painfully obvious I need to rescue Frank and Aiden, and do it safely. But wait, there was that other person I sensed at the start, and since I've already taken care of 3 of these goons, I'm really hoping Frank isn't captured and can just hang tight for a little longer. The mage tells the old guy, you go on ahead, and Ivan asks, what about you? The kid replies, this guy's a bit of a handful, and I can't really go all out with you here, but I'll catch up in a bit. Ivan's like, alright, you got it. Be careful. The merc smirks. You two done with the tearful goodbyes? And Frank's like, aren't you gonna chase the old man? The bandit just scoffs. Nah, I let the old geezer run. Figured he might actually make it. See, you're my real target. But I gotta ask, what's the big deal? Why is everyone so terrified of mages from the 4 big shot magic towers? Then he whips out his sword, all like, I'm gonna take out the squishy wizard first, and lunges like a maniac. Frank shoots a couple of get off my lawn, wind blasts at the merc, but the dude just bats him away with his sword, all smug-like, and goes, pff, too easy. He then goes for Frank's chest, telling him to make it interesting, asking if that's all the razzle-dazzle a fancy pants mage from the 4 great magic towers has got. But then he gets this weird feeling, like when you poke jello and it doesn't poke back. Yeah, the whole stabbing a dude sensation was totally missing. Things get real weird when Frank just grabs the blade and zips a wind slice right under the guy's chin. He drops like a sack of potatoes, and Frank's like, "Oh, sorry about that, my body's just built different, you know," with this weird whoosh sound in his chest. Frank himself looks shocked as the guy faceplants. Meanwhile, Oscar's watching the whole show from a safe distance, weapon in hand, thinking, well, Frank's a special little snowflake, isn't he? And realizing it's the god of wind, letting Frank turn any part of his body into a stiff breeze. Since you can't exactly punch the air, a guy like that is basically invincible without some magic or a glowy aura sword. He's only seen this stuff in books. And those stories were about the 7th master of the tower, some super special mage who was born with that party trick. But he never in a million years thought Frank Times would have it. Now this time's got his attention. Frank's like, "Dude, when did you get here?" And Oscar's all, "Nice work, champ. I was totally worried," but then he asks, "So where'd Ivan scamper off to while you were doing your victory dance?" And our hero suddenly remembers the old dude, like, "Oh crap, where is he? He should be back by now." Oscar's already thinking, if I whip this kid into shape, his weird wind power could be worth more than dozens of high-level mages. So, he points him in the direction of Ivan's life signal. The old man is super grateful, saying that if it weren't for them, he'd be pushing up daisies tomorrow. But Frank's all humble, like, "What did I do? It was all Oscar," but the mage shoots that down, admitting he totally got his butt kicked by the swordsman, and without Frank, they'd all be toast. Then he mutters some fancy Latin. Frank gets all red in the face hearing that, mumbling, "Ah, shucks, it's over now anyway." But Ivan's like, "Not so fast, kid, 'cause Devor isn't the type of jerk to just give up. If sending goons doesn't work, he'll just cook up another scheme." Frank asks why the guy's so hung up on that piece of dirt, and Ivan explains it's the biggest and best plot of land in all of Suriran. See, Siren soil has been getting crappier over the last 8 years. Because of that, these magical engineering factories have popped up, and they're dumping their magical gunk into the river every day, making the dirt even worse. Since you can't just fix the soil, he doesn't have the juice to grow his herbs. Oscar then chimes in, saying he's got a question for the old-timer. He wants to know if his whole loyalty thing with the White Tower is about that promise from the 4th master of the tower, that Reynoldus guy. And Ivan's surprised, like, "You know about that?" Turns out, it's an old story from the herb folks back in the day. A long, long time ago, people thought they were super sketchy, and basically called them witches. Since nobody knew what the herbs did, they'd just boil them in a pot and sell the mystery stew. So, the herbalists kept to themselves, living like wandering hippies. But then, a hero showed up, someone who was a total rock star in their eyes. The 4th master of the White Tower, Reynold Ace, told the herbalists to pack their bags and head to Suriran, promising it would be an eternal home for them and their little herb-loving kids. Oscar adds that they wouldn't be treated like losers who got conquered there, either. Ivan's like, "Man, what a tearjerker of a speech," and the kid's just like, "Yeah, I read it in a history book," probably thinking about how dusty that old book was, of Tower Masters. The old-timer spills the beans. After that, every herb nerd on the continent started flocking to Suriran, and for the first time ever, the wandering folks actually had a place to crash. The White Tower gave their ancestors a home and some serious street cred, so they were never going to ghost the White Tower. Oscar just gives him a blank stare, basically saying, "Appreciate you not slacking off all these years," and promises the White Tower's got his back now. Ivan's like, "Alright, what's the genius plan? Because if the royals get a whiff that we messed with a historical landmark, they'll be on us in a heartbeat. But we're stuck here, since the Imperial family moves at a snail's pace, and what if Devil goes full beast mode?" But Oscar cuts him off. "Oh, the Imperial family will be plenty fast, seeing as I'm about to sign a deal with them to cure their royal sniffles." Meanwhile, in Devorpo's office, he's screaming at his minion to get a move on because he screwed up so badly, they're about to go belly up. And after they skip town, his underling is probably heading for the pearly gates. But then the door gets kicked in, and a bunch of soldiers yell, "Freeze, dirtbags!" The head honcho introduces himself, name's Walker, top dog at Imperial Internal Affairs, and you must be Devor Paul. You're getting busted for attempted murder, bribery, trying to steal stuff, and wrecking a priceless cultural artifact. Devor's like, "Whoa, you got the wrong dude. I'm a stand-up guy." But Walker just tells him to can it. Yeah, we'll be the ones to decide that. The suit is thinking, crap, I'm in way over my head. If only I could call my guy. I could totally Houdini my way out of this. He asks the guard, "Hey, can a guy get a smoke break?" Walker is dead silent for a few seconds, then barks, "Slap the cuffs on him and get him out of my sight." Devor starts yelling, "You're making a huge mistake. You have no idea who's backing me." And Walker just smirks. "You're right, I don't. But the guy backing times me times is the Emperor. Is your buddy more important than His Majesty?" Then they snatch the cigarette right out of Devore's hand. Walker lights up a cigar, muttering, "Gotta hand it to him. These crooks have good taste." His subordinate says he has a question. "So, who's the big shot that got us dragged out on a day like this?" But Walker just says, "Orders from the top, kid." Apparently, our emperor is a huge White Tower fanboy. This is all grown-up drama, don't worry about it. I don't even get why he's so obsessed. Sure, they were heroes, but that was like 20 years ago. If you toss a bird with a busted wing into the air, the only thing that changes is how fast it faceplants. And the White Tower just doesn't have the juice to deserve this kind of VIP treatment. Then he asks, "How old are you, kid?" And he says, "I'm 23. So Walker says, "You were 3. You were 3 years old back then. I was 12, right when humanity finally got to breathe after kicking some demon tail, and I'm just wondering what the heck the White Tower even is anymore. 'Cause the legend I remember no longer lives up to the hype." Then he says, "All right, let's bounce. We got one more house call to make," and his subordinate whines, "Aw man, I thought this was the last stop." But then he's all, "So, where we off to?" And Walker says, "We're heading west to shut down some factory that's been dumping its garbage. We'll handle that, then we can finally go home." He's thinking, great, something else got piled on my plate, and he didn't know squat about the White Tower. Oscar Crucian and Frank serious? But hey, he'd pay them back for taking care of that Shooter Jack gang. His subordinate then asks, "So, can we get food?" On its way, but Walker totally shot that down. Oscar's all like, "Great job, Frank," and Frank's already asking if they can grab a beer. But the new guy says they've got to report to the vice leader first. Frank tries to argue, but then the vice leader himself starts yelling for Oscar from behind them, leaving the blue-haired kid completely baffled, muttering about how this ruins his plans before just storming off. Hamill says he thought he saw Frank, but maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him, and Oscar's like, "Nope, the vice leader was right, but he had to jet for something super important." The old man sighs, always some 5-alarm fire with him, and figures the young magic whiz must have pulled off another miracle, since he heard the whole report from his office. Oscar says he was already heading over, so they just hop in the elevator together to Hamill's office. Oscar gets a feeling that something's not quite right. Hamill cuts to the chase. "Heard anything from Frank?" The kid says no, but asks, "Why, what's up?" And the old man drops the bomb that he got a message from the Sirius family, saying they're officially yanking Frank back home. Oscar's like, did he actually agree to ditch the White Tower? Hamill says they already had the talk with him, but he's still in the dark about the nitty-gritty details. A knock on Frank's door makes him yell, "Grank, is that you? Get in here." Oscar's just thinking, who the heck is Grank to the heir of the biggest trading company in the Empire? And Frank just groans, "Dude, I can hear every single word you're saying." The mage asks him straight up, "So, you're really leaving the White Tower?" And the kid apologizes for keeping it on the down low, but he's got to get back to his post and help the family business until he gets hitched. Oscar's like, "Wait, hitched? You're dating someone?" Frank just shrugs. Apparently she's a decent person from a good family and she's pretty, so it's whatever. But Oscar says, "That's not the point. Are you seriously just gonna give up on magic?" Frank's like, "What else am I supposed to do? It was my one and only talent. Honestly, I thought I was something special, but I'm basically at the bottom of the barrel in this magic tower. At least I could have been a big fish in a small pond, but since that's not happening, I kinda knew this was coming. I can't just stick around, and I get where my family's coming from about me returning." But Oscar just says his name again, all serious. Frank asks, "Why are you saying my name so weird? Is it because I called the tower a bunch of weaklings?" But Oscar tells him, "You're talented," which totally hits Frank right in the feels. He's like, "Wow, thanks. Hearing that from a genius on my way out is pretty cool." Then Oscar asks, "So, you want to give it a shot, becoming that big fish?" Just then, someone else busts into the room calling for Frank. The guy asks, "This your buddy? Look, I'll give my little brother 5 minutes to hurry up and meet me. I'll be waiting so you can finish your tearful goodbyes." But Oscar cuts in, "How much? What's your price for Frank to stay at the tower?" Grank's like, "Who do you think you are, saying that?" And Oscar introduces himself, which makes the guy realize he's the mage who created that miracle medicine. So, he introduces himself too. Grank Sirius, older brother of this fool right here. Oscar says he's about to make an offer, but Grank just scoffs. "You're playing with fire, kid. I heard you were a genius. Is that it? You've got some serious nerve trying to make a deal with the Sirius family." And Oscar just replies, "Hey, it wouldn't be a bad deal for either of us. I'll turn Frank into one of the best mages in this tower in just 2 years. In the long run, that's a huge asset for your family." Grank just repeats that back to him and asks, "And what's the penalty if you fail?" The mage says he'll give up 50 years of profits from the I Slide the Cadena flu vaccine deal over to Sirius. Then the old-timer pipes up, "And who gave you the authority for that?" So I'm like, "Oh, just the vice master of the tower, no big deal." Grank squints at me and goes, "So, is Frank actually any good? Or is this just some little buddy-buddy deal?" I shot back, "Obviously it's because the guy's a rock star. I'm planning to make the White Tower cool again, you know? Like, a full-on glow-up in under 5 years, and this is just the opening act. And for that, I need Frank Sirius. He's the secret ingredient. For the brand spanking new White Tower I've got cooking." Grank's like, "You're just a kid, but hey, I'm not one to stop an enemy from making a dumb move. But I'm gonna tack on one little condition." I'm like, "Dude, my offer was already a steal." And he just nods and says, "You forgot something. We merchants value trust more than money, and I don't make deals with just anybody. Not until they prove they're the real deal. I've got a level 5 knight on my security detail, and tomorrow, your boy's gonna fight him." I had to ask, "You do realize he's a level 2 mage, right? It's a pea shooter versus a tank." Grank just says, "As a condition, my guard can't use his key sword." I'm thinking, great, this guy isn't giving up. Probably because some strategic marriage is hanging in the balance. Then the old dude says, "See you at noon. If you're a no-show, I'll just assume you chickened out." I'm sitting there thinking, heck, even I'd have a tough time with that. A level 5 is no joke, and Frank's looking at me all wide-eyed like, "So, what's the plan, boss? You can totally call this off right now, I'm just saying. My brother's already saying he'll pound me for being a wimp. But look, if you're too embarrassed to back down, I'll go with you, man." I just said, "Oh, I could totally do it. If I were a level 4 mage." Frank just stares at me. "And how exactly do you plan? To hit level 4 in one single day?" But I tell him, "For me, impossible. But for a level 3 mage to hit level 4, that's a different story. Your brother never said times I times had to win the fight myself, just that I had to prove my skills. So I'm gonna show him. Frank Sirius," I yelled, "because I'm gonna make you a level 4 mage, and you're gonna fight for me." Next thing you know, we're in the training room on the 40th floor, and Frank's whining, "How am I supposed to do in one day what I couldn't do in years?" I'm all zen like, "Dude, it's possible. Just get into a natural pose, don't be all awkward about it. Close your eyes, and just let the mana flow through everything. Vibe with it." I tell him it looks good, then I start poking him in a few spots. "See here, and here? You're leaking mana all over the place when you circulate it. That's why your magic level is totally stuck." Frank's mind is blown. "Wait, all you geniuses can see this stuff? So if I just plug the leaks, I'll level up?" But I had to tell him, "At your level, it doesn't really matter. Most mages are blissfully unaware. But that top 1%, the guys they call Archmages? Oh yeah, they care. So starting today, welcome to boot camp. Every morning, we're gonna get your mana circuits running smoother than a fresh oil change. It needs to feel as natural as breathing." Frank goes, "Is that all?" And I'm like, "Oh sweetie, no, we're just getting warmed up. Now, show it to me. That magic you pulled out during the herb field fight." Frank just freezes up. "I can't." I thought maybe he didn't trust me, but he shot that down fast. "It's not about trust, man, I'm scared of it." And he says it again just to make sure I got the message. He explains that he almost bought the farm using that magic before. The anxiety just got worse as he got older. It was because his family was ready to roast him on an open spit if he didn't start producing some real mage results. He figured he had to do something nobody else could even dream of copying. He thought, what if it wasn't just a part of my body, but my whole time's body could just, poof, turn into wind. He'd become, like, ridiculously powerful. But that was a super dumb idea, because for a hot second he thought it worked, but then he noticed something a little off. You know, his whole body was turning into a puff of smoke and just vanishing. Total, epic, fail, and after half of him went poof, his mana went completely haywire. He started screaming his head off for literally anyone to save him. If the Tower Master hadn't been just strolling by, he would have been totally wiped from existence. Plus there's the feeling of your soul getting shattered into a million tiny pieces. Yeah, he never wanted to feel times again. Oscar mentions he used it up on the hill, and Frank warns him that it just kicks in automatically when things get dicey, but calls it pathetic, and Oscar's just not having it, telling him not to think like that. Most mages hit a snag like this, and the fix is stupidly simple. In his case, his whole deal is controlling his mana. He just needs to get better at it. And Frank's like, mana control is pure talent, Oscar says. Yeah, most of the time. But there's a little life hack to just force the issue, and then draws a circle on the ground. Frank totally freaks. Are you making a deal with a demon? But the kid's just like, nah, they wouldn't even answer my call. He was gonna summon a wind spirit to, transplant into his body. So Frank starts introducing himself to the air, asking it to embody purity within him. But crickets. And Oscar's just like, wow, your connection with spirits is terrible. The kid goes, I felt a little breeze just now. But his friend shoots back, dude, that was me sighing at you. Frank starts complaining, and Oscar tells him not to get all mopey, because basically no humans are on speaking terms with spirits anyway. His friend whines, then why'd you get my hopes up? If I can't summon a spirit, I can't control my mana. But the mage is all cool, chill. I've got another trick up my sleeve. A little something I learned when I visited the elf kingdom in my past life. Pulled it off just for kicks back then, so it'll totally work again. Frank asks if he should try the chant again, but his buddy tells him to step aside, cause he's gonna give it a shot, thinking the king of spirits will totally remember him. Oscar closes his eyes, pretending he's not in this dump of a training room, but standing before the gigantic world tree. Then he calls out to the wind spirit, telling it to get over here. Frank's just like, what was that? And did he actually nail it on the first try? The wind spirit pops in like, was that the human who pinged me? Cause it's been the first time in 27 years my phone has rung. Oscar thinks, yep, same one, and says he wants a contract, asking if there's any paperwork. The spirit's like, nah, man, we don't need all that formal junk. So, does this human want to make a friendship bond with the highest ranking spirit, Celestine? And Oscar just goes, nope, thinking he really should have led with that. He doesn't need a spirit. He only called the big boss for his buddy's sake. The next day in the duel hall, Grank asks the vice leader if he got his beauty sleep, and Hamill confirms. So the young master's like, you good with the schedule? The old guy agrees and mutters that the dude who invented the cure was a real piece of work. Grank then presents the knight fighting today, and the redhead announces, the name's Lasley Morgan, a level 5 knight, and Oscar introduces himself. Grank then explains the rules of the duel. It's basically magical tag. First one to snatch the other guy's necklace wins. And if Oscar doesn't win within 5 minutes, it's an automatic loss for him. He's just like, sounds good to me. Let's get this show on the road. So, Grank's like, hey, if you want to chicken out, just raise your hand, and then asks, seriously, you good with that outfit? The kid's all, yeah, it's fine, cause I'm not the one throwing down. Frank squares up with his brother, and Grank is just completely blindsided, asking, what's that supposed to mean? Oscar explains, you told me to prove my ability, not that I had to fight myself, and I spent yesterday coaching my buddy here. The big bro's like, okay, fine, my bad for not adding that little condition, but you don't really think I'll go easy on Frank, do you? Oscar says, nope, I just figured a level 4 mage has, way better odds than a level 2-1, and Grank just sputters. Level 4? Wait, wasn't he a level 3 just yesterday? Oscar casually replies, hey, to make Frank a top-tier mage in 2 years, he's gotta show off this kind of progress. Grank orders Lasley, don't you dare hold back, and his knight is all business. Meanwhile, Oscar gives Frank a supportive smack on the back, telling him, don't get cold feet, because if you pull off everything we practiced yesterday, you've totally got this in the bag. The blue-haired kid nods in agreement, saying, I'll be back in one piece. Lasley remarks, it's been a minute, and his young master nods. And with that, it was time to kick things off. The duel starts with Frank backing up, trying to get about 20 meters of space, but he can already feel something's weird because of the insane pressure being rolling off Lasley. Even without his main sword and from this far, the dude was still an absolute beast. That's a class 5 for you. As he's thinking, is it too late to bail on this? Oscar spots his buddy's hesitation, and then Frank remembers something important. Oscar had told him he was needed, that he was basically hand-picked for his new tower, and, since he'd already lost the swordsman, they'd be totally screwed without him. Frank clenches his fist, launching a wicked blade of wind right at the knight. He's thinking, I'm doing this, because for the first time in his whole life, someone actually said they needed him. So there's no way he can let them down now. Lasley casually parries the blades with his sword, thinking the kid got a lot better. He's using jewel casting to spread the impact, he muses. Is he trying to pull off that fancy sword control trick from the Eastern nation? But he blocks the final attack with his own blade. The wind blade just freezes, hanging in the air as Lasley charges, thinking, okay, I've seen enough. Frank panics. He's way too fast. And to stop the charge, he throws up a giant wind palm with his blade magic. Grank's just floored. How did he get that good in half a day? Did you two use some forbidden power-up or something? Oscar's super chill about it. Relax, no need to worry. We used a totally legit method. He really did have a massive glow-up, but that was all he had. Frank just isn't built like a battle mage, and since he's weaker than the others, leveling up would just get him hurt. And honestly, that would be a relief. It's way better for him to be a corporate drone than to get wrecked and make the family freak out. He'd be too scared to ever try leveling up his magic again. But just then, Laszlo gets right in there, about to snatch the blue necklace. Oscar just grins and says, "Game over." Grank whips his head around to his buddy, wondering what's with the creepy smile. Flashback to the night before, Oscar had said, Spirit transplant was a total success and asked, "So, can you use your wind god magic?" Frank was like, "Yeah, it feels totally natural now." The mage says, "You can't go full-on wind body yet, since you haven't, completed your trauma." So Frank asks if there's just no chance of winning tomorrow. But Oscar shuts that down, saying, "If you use the wind god, your odds are 100%. Then he asks what Frank thought about just turning his whole body into wind. Frank then asks, "Is that all?" And his teacher gives him one last warning. He was told not to be reckless, but Frank thinks he can't win unless he uses the wind god. Laszlo approaches, and Frank realizes he needs to decide now. Okay, now for the juicy part. This is the most busted power of them all. His special trick? It turns anything he's wearing into pure wind. Yeah, you heard me. It's the most ridiculously overpowered thing about being the wind god's favorite. But you gotta save your best moves for last, you know? Winning too easily is just boring, and it's way more fun to be dancing around Laszlo's attacks. So, Frank just waltzes up and snags the necklace right out of the knight's hand, who's looking totally stunned. The knight's just like, "Welp, guess that's that." Frank pops the necklace into his hand, and bam, it lights up like a Christmas tree. Frank yells, "I finally did it." Meanwhile, Grank shoots up, thinking, "Hold on, the magic doctor swore he'd never use that thing again." Hamill's just chuckling like, "Well folks, looks like we have a winner," then asks if anyone objects. Of course Oscar is already giving his buddy a big ol' attaboy. Grank's just standing there, muttering, "Wait, didn't he say he trained for, like, asterisk 1 times day?" Then he just hangs his head and admits defeat, while Frank's shaking the knight's hand. Hamill chimes in, "You guys worked so hard to get here. It's a real shame to see you go so soon." But Grank cuts him off. "Just look after my little brother, will ya? I think Frank's grown up a little." Then he's like, never mind, and storms off. Frank just stands there, quiet, and Oscar's thinking, what a character. Frank's totally beaming but playing it cool, like he didn't hear a thing. So, fast forward to the next day, Frank's like, is this the front door? Why does my training room look suspiciously like a dungeon? This is a basement prison, isn't it? And Oscar just says, "It's got character, been in use for hundreds of years. But yeah, you're not wrong." Frank whines, "Why do I have to train in solitary confinement?" And Oscar's like, "Hey, the Vice Master himself ordered it. He's got big plans for you, kid." But Frank is not having it, complaining, "Solitary after times 1 times day off? Are you kidding me?" Oscar just tells him, "Look on the bright side. All you gotta do is help out the spirit." Frank moans, "Yeah, I guess." But his buddy shoots back, "Quit being such a baby. It's not like you're gonna die down here." Frank mutters, "Are you sure times about that?" before they finally say their goodbyes. In his head, Oscar is thinking, "Sorry, pal." Because, let's be real, this whole isolation chamber thing was his idea. Cut to that night, right after the duel. Hamill's asking Oscar, "You really want to lock Frank up for 30 days? The kid just won, for crying out loud." And Oscar's just like, "Trust me, he needs it." The vice leader sighs. "Alright, we'll go easy on him for a month. On the bright side, I've got good news. The Sirius company just told us we can use their entire distribution network, no strings attached." And Oscar's first question is, "Wait, like, for free?" His brain's already crunching the numbers, thinking, "Wow, that was fast. Classic corporation move. They're betting big that we'll make a killing if the tower gets its groove back and Frank becomes some legendary mage." So he's like, I guess I can't feel too bad about it," and says out loud, "Well, that times is asterisk. Some seriously good news." Then Hamill's like, "Okay, item number 2 on the agenda. How would you feel about giving a FERF items lecture?" Oscar's like, I times could asterisk. But he's thinking, didn't Hamill just tell me to focus on the potion department? So he asks, "Is there some reason the White Tower suddenly needs to get jacked? Like, yesterday?" Hamill just grins, "Heh, you catch on quick. Ever hear of the Night of the Mages? It's that one day a year when wizards from all over get together. It was supposed times to be a day for showing off their skills in perfect harmony. The Emperor's big idea for team building. But let's be real, that was never gonna happen. The whole thing just turns into a giant magical cage match every single time. That thing got cancelled ages ago, so why's Hamill suddenly digging it up? Is the big cheese trying to bring back the Night of the Mages?" And Hamill's like, You nailed it. It's still on the down low, but they're planning a big reveal around New Year's, and he's getting some seriously bad vibes from the Black Tower, because if they keep gunning to be one of the big 4 major towers, there's a pretty good chance the White Tower is going to get jumped, and frankly, it's making him sweat. Oscar just says, "I'm on it," and Hamill totally calls him out on his sudden poker face. Meanwhile, up on the 36th floor of the Magic Tower's campus, Oscar's thinking the White Tower is trying to level up, and man, are they cocky about it. But hey, at least it's a huge relief that Frank is a solid level 4. The whole ceremony for some low-level spirit was a total power move, and he's super grateful, thinking a demigod probably wouldn't even remember a puny human like him. Asterisk asterisk. Fast forward to another day, another spirit summoning party, and this spirit pops up like, "Alright, who's the wise guy summoning one of us to play matchmaker for other people?" Oscar's all, "Whoa there, take a chill pill." And then he calls out for Silifrian of the Silence, asking him to spread the word that the White Mage is back in town. The spirit's like, "You've got some serious nerve dropping the Spirit King's name," but then a bunch of sparkly butterflies just start appearing out of nowhere. The spirit is totally bugging out, like, "Who times or times you? You just summoned the King of Spirits with a single word." Oscar just smirks. "Hey, where's the fun in that?" Then asks if he can get a little favor. The spirit says the Queen gave the okay for a simple transplant, no contract needed. The mage is like, "Perfect, tell her I said thanks." But the spirit warns him, "Oh, and she said not to forget that little promise you made." The kid's just thinking, "Lady, relax, I got this," because he's totally gonna keep his word and save a bunch of White Tower families because of it, but he's planning to pay her back with interest with a super boring paper from his lecture on reinterpreting basic magic. But first things first, he's gotta handle some family business. So this dude in a suit strolls in, saying, "Well, look at all these familiar faces. I thought you were all pushing up daisies by now. The last time I saw you, anyway. Is this lecture just for level 3s? 'Cause I'm not seeing any big shots." And his buddy asks, "Maybe it's 'cause it's a basic class and all the heavy hitters are busy?" Then some girl chimes in, "It must be true that the White Tower has deep pockets. I heard the Vice Master himself invited this lecturer. Apparently, the whole place was also under Imperial watch." And her friend's like, "Whoa, this lecturer must be a pretty big deal. I can't wait." But then one guy just scoffs, "Don't make me laugh. Holding a lecture in this dusty old hall nobody ever uses? Please." And of course, the big mouth is Demian Proud, the one and only son of the Proud Nation. The girl's like, "Geez, Demian, way to be a buzzkill." But the other guy says, "Nah, it's an investment. If they were just trying to copy the other magic towers, they wouldn't be rehashing basic magic. I mean, can't you just look around? There are 32 people here. Only one of the lower-ranked scrubs didn't even bother to show." And this is going to be a great lesson, just like he said. So he was positive that so-called noble level 2 genius would show up, too. But then, something cuts through the chatter, and the whole room just goes dead silent. The blonde kid is thinking, "I can't hear a thing. It's just so quiet." And then Oscar strolls into the room, all cool like, "Hey everyone, nice to meet you. As of right now, I'm the guy who's going to be teaching you about the reinterpretation of basic magic. Name's Oscar Crushin, by the way." The students are all whispering, "Wait, this dude's only a level 2? And Oscar says, "I know many of you are super disappointed that I'm the one up here." He's thinking, "Yep, I can feel the letdown from here. A low level teaching a class? The nerve, mage to be a lecturer, and he's got to be feeling pretty awkward about not using magic." Oscar's like, "Alright, if any of you are having second thoughts, you can totally bounce right now. You're not little academy kids under my thumb anymore. But there's just one tiny condition. You gotta prove you're too cool for school. Show me you don't need this lesson. And the clock's ticking. You got 10 minutes. And in that time, you have to actually say you're ditching my class. Easiest test ever, right?" But the students started grumbling because he had just made it so. They couldn't even talk, and now he's telling them to do this. Plus, it was a real test because he's a level 2 mage, so this definitely wasn't your garden variety hush spell, but it was totally solvable. In other words, he was saying if you can't even unmute yourselves and speak up, then your butts belong in my classroom. Oscar was thinking, "I left a few breadcrumbs in the spell on purpose, but that doesn't mean it's a cakewalk." As the last grain of sand was about to fall, he asks, "So, for real? Nobody? No takers at all?" Then bam, Demian slams the table, shouting, "I got it." Oscar's thinking, "Wait, isn't that kid from the beginner's circle?" Demian's looking smug as heck, so Oscar congratulates him, and the kid just goes, "Pfft, piece of cake. Way easier than I thought. I just, took my time with it." The timer dings, the spell breaks, and Oscar tells everyone, "Alright, pipe down, people. Time's up and only Demian passed the vibe check." Demian's all, "Yeah, no duh. So, I'm good to go, right? No class for me. And the teacher's like, you got it. The prince is thinking, whoa, he just let him walk? Man, now I'm actually curious what we'd learn in here. Oscar's just smirking. This kid's an open book. I can see every thought bubble. So, he says, hey, for being the lone wolf winner, you get a prize. I'll teach you a spell. What's your favorite basic one? And Demian, without skipping a beat, says, wind/obviously. So the teacher tells him, all right, let's see it. The student groans like it's a huge chore, conjures his magic, and asks, there. You happy now? Not bad, Oscar says, and as a reward, I'll teach you a times real times wind/today. Demian's like, did you not just see that thing? Floating right in front of me? But the teacher just scoffs. By my standards, that was a half-baked copy. You've got two major problems. He whips out a knife and says, first off, that thing wasn't made of wind. Let me ask you, what do you think wind even is? The kid says, it's moving air, duh. But the teacher replies, water is still water in a puddle, and fire is still fire, no matter what. But wind? That's air in constant motion, which is why your wind/ was a total flop. Just, like stagnant water gets gross, magic made of air just poofs if it stops moving, so you gotta stay on your toes, since the White Tower is the place that deals with wind. In other words, the magic has to keep flowing. If not, just like I showed you a minute ago, it'll get torn apart. So, Demian asks, what's the other problem? And Oscar says, you're wasting way too much magic casting that spell. It'll help a ton if you just tone it down. Once your magic gets to a certain level, you can learn a lot just by watching your opponent, like their whole personality. Sound a little nosy? You can even see a bit of their past. And since you're from that fancy pants family, you naturally tried to follow in their footsteps by copying their wind/. But trying to copy that spell before you even learned the basics? That's a tall order, since it's one of the trickiest basic spells there is, so you just pumped way more mana into it than you needed. And that became a bad habit you still have. Oscar says, but hey, now that we know the cause, you'll have a perfect wind/ if you fix it. Too bad you already lost your prompt, a student from his class, and losing him would be a total bummer. But wait, Damon just U-turns and asks whoever said he was ditching as he struts back to his throne. I mean, his seat. Fast forward 3 weeks, and the school gossip is all about how Oscar is absolutely killing it, saying he's like the rock star of instructors. A classmate asks, yeah, but is he any good for us intermediate folks? And the other guy just scoffs. Dude, even some level 4 and 5 big shots are crashing his class. So the first kid's like, should we get in on this? And blue hair is all, honestly, I've been waiting for you to ask. Let's bounce, we've got a crew of 7 ready to roll. The class starts at 9, and we gotta be there early. Seriously, if we're late, we might not even get a spot. And just like that, all the students in the cafeteria, who were totally pretending not to listen, suddenly shoot up, ready for an adventure. People in the actual class are whispering, why are there so many level 4 and 5 mages in Magic 101? Heck, even Elder Maxim is here. This is less of a class and more like a full-blown magic convention. Oscar then strolls in like a celebrity, good morning everyone, and says the spell they're about to learn is super important, so it's a good thing they all showed up. The students go wild with excitement, and the teacher says, this spell is basically going to be your best friend for your entire magic career. And it's the basic wind spell. The whole class is thinking, you mean the most basic spell of all time? The one we learn the second we walk into the White Tower? Maxim chimes in, oh, don't mind me, just observing. But I gotta ask, are you seriously about to teach times wind times to this crowd? The teacher just smiles and confirms it, then asks, say, Elder, could you give us a little demo? Maxim unleashes this hurricane-level wind spell that practically blows everyone over. He smirks, how's that for a demonstration? Oscar's like, perfect, thanks. And then points to a student, Annie Raven, you're up. Do the same spell. The girl is like, why me? There are way better mages here, but she casts the wind spell anyway. The students all murmur that it felt like a gentle, warm hug. Oscar then asks, all right, class, who can spot the difference? Everyone starts shouting out the obvious stuff, like strength and range, but then some brainiac in the back mumbles something about mana temperament. Oscar's eyes light up. Veronica Fricks, you nailed it! Just like she said, there's a difference in the vibe times of the mana they created. And what's wild is that the whole process, from start to finish, was exactly the same. One of them was like a scorching desert blast, and the other was as soft as a spring breeze. The difference is so huge you'd barely call them the same spell. Which brings me to my next question. Who here can tell me what the heck mana temperament even is? Some kid starts rambling about the 4 types of mana, but the teacher cuts him off. Nope, totally different concept, my friend. It's about how you times understand times mana. You all have to learn the founding principles of the White Tower, in other words, balance. So, pop quiz. Why are white and blue our poster children? One student guesses it's about the elements, and Oscar's like, bingo! The red and gold towers are all about brute force and speed, but they have zero chill. Only wind and water can be hot times or times cold, which is the very symbol of balance, and that clear distinction is what makes the white and blue towers so special. It's all about how they rock that balance. For example, the recipe for boiling water is pretty simple. You need standard atmospheric pressure, 100 degrees, a little bit of time, and it's even simpler because making hot wind is way easier than boiling water. Getting the hang of that is even easier. You can change nature like a chameleon, making the room go cold. Wind is the ultimate free spirit of the elements. It can pack a punch like the flames of the red tower. You can be zippy like the gold tower's lightning, or just go with the flow like the blue tower's water. But wait, there's more. The blue tower's water is picky and can't mix with oil. But wind? Wind's the ultimate free spirit. It's got whatever personality your little mage heart can dream up. Wind is the ultimate social butterfly. It gets along with literally everything. Which means you White Tower folks better get your heads on straight. You gotta figure out your personal relationship with the wind, you know? Ask yourself, what times is times wind to me, man? And that, my friends, was the whole point of today's lecture. Some dude next to the old guy starts yapping, just as Maxim is having a heart-to-heart with the breeze. Oscar's like, whoa, pump the brakes, buddy. Don't do a thing while the old-timer keeps sweet-talking the air and the teacher starts to panic. Maxim's just like, nah, I got this. I'm sure of it. It's totally happening. But Oscar's waving his arms like a madman. Don't you dare touch him. Everybody back up, give the man some space. You're gonna mess up his big brain moment. The students are all, huh? What's going on? And Oscar's like, duh, Maxim's leveling up, people. It's an awakening. And just like that, the old dude's eyes pop open. The young guy asks if he's alright, and Maxim just sighs. Still not level 8. He thanks Oscar for the save, but Oscar's like, hey, I'm the teacher here. I should be thanking times you times for the free show. The young man says, sweet, thinking to himself, yes, now my classes will be a total cakewalk, and no one's gonna mess with me. All those peons below me can just stay down, he thought. But the real prize was spotting Veronica Fricks in that crowd. He actually managed to get the attention of one of the major troublemakers he'd read all about in Oscar's secret little journal. The next day, our boy is strolling through the tower, thinking, Veronica said there was something cool in the training room, and she was probably only being friendly because she actually liked my lesson. He just knows she was giving him that look, that pity look, because he had no clue where the gym was. He finally gets to a door and thinks, is this the spot? He'd heard that. 3 of the 13 training rooms looked like this, but the doors were different colors. He wondered, so, is this one like VIP or something? I mean, they wouldn't go to all this trouble if it wasn't some fancy magic door that only opens when you boop it. Oscar looks up, talking about the weird vibes he's getting, when a voice booms. Greetings. I am Argo, your next-gen workout buddy. And Oscar's first thought is, magical engineering. So those jerks from the Gold Tower definitely blew the entire budget on this. They must have siphoned all the funds for this glorified rec room. Meanwhile, Argo's like, register your info for a personalized training plan. But our boy is like, nah, I'm good. I'm going in incognito. So now he's got to pick the training level himself. There are 100 levels to choose from, so you can train at your own pace. Oscar just tells it, alright, start me at level 1. Easy peasy. The system's like, you got it. And poof, 3 balls appear. It tells the mage to either punch him or magic him till they pop. Oh, and if you use a big area spell, it won't count, you cheater. But the kid pops them like it's nothing, and just like that, level 1 is history. Oscar thinks, okay, not a bad warm-up. Time to crank things up a notch. Argo chimes in. So, what'll it be, champ? Which level you want? The mage just says, level 100. The system basically screams back, WHOA. The balls are gonna get tiny, crazy fast, and they're gonna try to mess you up. And if you feel like you're in deep trouble, just hit the cancel button. Oscar's just thinking, man, how awesome do you have to be to handle this chaos? When a super fast blur of light zips right past his head, Argo announces, alright hero, your mission is to pop all 1,000 of these balls with magic, or a good old-fashioned punch. Same rules apply, no cheap area spells. And if you get tagged more than 10 times, it's game over. Oscar immediately unleashes 3 blasts of wind. He's just slicing away, trying to pop those suckers in a line, realizing he's gotta burst them fast or his mana's gonna be on empty. So, he's like, alright, time to crank it up, and summons a bunch more wind daggers that actually start popping the things. Oscar's thinking, yeah, making them bigger and pointier totally worked, but then it hits him that he's basically using cheat codes on a kid's training level. Argo congratulates him on clearing level 100, and Oscar, sprawled out on the floor like a starfish, just goes, yeah, that was a decent warm-up. He's thinking the mages of this generation have to train like this from day one, and the bar for what's considered good is just way higher now. So I've got to work even harder, and eat more to pack on some muscle. Right on cue, Veronica strolls into the room. She says, I'm surprised you actually showed up. And Oscar's like, just here to get an early start, calling out for Verna, but the girl cuts in. She replies, I figured you just ignored what I said. Oscar plays it off, saying, nah, just came to visit. My philosophy is that a healthy mana makes a healthy body. The girl immediately calls him out. Isn't that Oscar Sage's line? Did you eat something funky this morning? She's wondering why he's trying to pass off Oscar Sage's famous line as his own, and why this total jerk who always looked down on her for being a noble even though they were both orphans suddenly had a personality transplant. Then she tells Argo to prep a level 50 warm-up. She asks if the rankings changed and if Killian's still on top, but Argo cryptically says there has, in fact, been an update. The girl tells it to pull up the new rankings, sees the name AA, and is like, who is that? But Argo says that due to personal information security, it can't tell her. The girl wonders if it's an elder, but then immediately shoots that idea down. She reasons you have to be below level 5 to even get a rank, yet this person somehow beat the 10-minute demon's record. Argo then says, he was the very first to do it, but when the girl demands to know who, the system just repeats its personal security excuse. She asks if it was Oscar who crushed it, but Argo just gives her the same old answer. Elsewhere, our boy is walking down the hall wondering if he's going to be super sore later, but he runs right into Elder Maxim. Oscar greets him, and the elder says it's perfect timing. He says he has something he needs to ask him, mentioning that Fidelina said the merchants have stopped buying their potions. He's sure it's the Azure Tower's fault, and figures that as a member of the production team, Oscar must know something. Oscar, meanwhile, walks away completely irritated. He's thinking about those pathetic jerks and then wonders why the heck the coffee line is so long today. A nearby student comments that an email went out to the 1st through 5th posts and asks if he heard that starting today. They're all getting a pay raise. Oscar wonders if they're delivery workers, and his colleague comments that they're finally catching a break. The mage thinks to himself that deliveries can't be a huge market because you need a ton of workers, you don't make much money or gain any real power, and the only perk is getting good ratings from the citizens. A red-haired delivery guy says the elders are giving them food because they're working their tails off. That little detail catches Oscar's attention. He politely asks them, hey, when you're making deliveries, do you have to meet people in person a lot? The delivery workers say, yeah, absolutely, since they need to get a signature on the container as proof of delivery. The mage tells them that was a huge help and thanks them. As he dashes off, we see Hamill summarizing his students' info. He asks if Oscar wants to do door-to-door deliveries, and the mage is totally on board. The old man then says that so the merchants were basically out of business, figured they'd sell directly to the people, but their potions were collecting dust until Oscar blurts out he's brewing up something new. Hamill's all like, innovation, but the kid's just like, whoa, let's not call it that, seeing as it's just a mid-tier healing potion that's a huge hit at the White Tower, and they can totally tweak this magic juice and split it into 4 versions, for different ages and genders. Oscar starts zoning out, dreaming up the specs for each of the 4 potions to really vibe with the regular folks. A few days later, some old-timer is parked on a bench, whining about how he's gotten ancient and is running on fumes. A delivery guy walks up and is like, hey, good to see you're still kicking after yesterday. I've got a letter for you today. And the old fella just grins, thinking, sweet, my buddies are still alive and kicking. The delivery guy then mentions the senders were from the Centennial generation. The old man's like, the what now? I'm only 80. And he groans that his head feels like a bowling ball because he's got 0 energy. So the delivery guy, seeing an opportunity, asks the old man, why don't you try this? He whips out a potion, saying, it's the latest and greatest from my magic tower, a little pick-me-up called S0. And that's all she wrote for this video. If you had a good time, do us a solid and smash that like and subscribe button. Catch you on the flip side.